I am not Mike Gill. This is Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Hanging out with Hunter Brody on a TGIF edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you see Broads on the right screen. I am on the left screen. I was going to wear this shirt no matter what, but the Sixers lost, so I feel a little ridiculous wearing it. But you know what? I like this shirt. I like this outfit, so I wore it anyway.
It's not black.
Well, the pants are black.
Oh, so that counterbalances your...
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
I always have to wear black
somewhere. I don't know the Josh thoughts while getting dressed.
I'm very specific in my color and my outfits. I'm very deliberate.
Are the Eagles?
No, the Eagles, we're going to get into that because I don't know if the Eagles know what they're doing. Rob Motti just came out with a couple of reported tweets. We'll get to that in just a moment. Plus, we're talking about the Sixers. Sixers lose in Portland last night. Guess what? They didn't just lose. I won because they covered the 5.5 did Portland. So there you go.
Well, that's more important.
Right.
No one cares about the Sixers record. It's about Josh's pockets.
I actually saw Paul Hudrick, who will be joining us on Inside the Sixers earlier this morning, doing an interview. And he said some very interesting things about the out-of-bounds play. And it vibed with how I felt last night watching that out-of-bounds play. Looking forward to talking with Paul. Adam Caplan, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. This Eagles stuff is out of control. Not because the Eagles are out of control, but I feel like the environment and the vibes around it are out of control, if you know what I mean.
I think everything's out of control at this point. Think about what we're even discussing.
That's true. By the way, we also will be talking with PT, Happy Hour Friday with PT at 5 o'clock. And I had a conversation with the UFC Welterweight champion of the world fighting at UFC 258 tomorrow night, Kamaru Usman. You will hear that coming up in the 5 o'clock hour tonight. And we'll get Bro's reaction because he is a UFCsman.
Can't wait for this. Are you kidding me? I've been thinking about it all day long.
So we mentioned the Eagles news that just popped off roughly about 20 minutes ago. So I'm going to first read what Rob Motti says, and then we can get into it, just for a little context. Because I feel like you got to read something for what it is before you actually make assumptions. You know what I mean? Like at some point, you got to just put it out there. So here's the tweet from Rob Motti on Twitter. Direct response from a team official about a report that the best offer for the Eagles got for Carson Wentz was 2 second-round picks plus a potential third or fourth. The official is saying, quote, "We made a better offer," unquote. I wasn't told what a better offer entailed. Stay tuned. Now, Rob then says right after that on Twitter, as you can see on the screen, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, it should be very clear from the wording of my tweet. This is not from the Eagles. The tweet clearly states a response from a team official saying, "We made a better offer." So what Motti is trying to explain is that there's a report out there, which is one of three. This is the third report now. Very important we keep in context this. All right? The first report that came out a few days ago was, remember, it was the Eagles are asking for too much. The follow-up on that was the Eagles want a Matthew Stafford return for Wentz. Then the second report was the 2 second-round picks. Now Rob Motti is coming out, who's been here on the Sports Bash with you and Mike Gill in the past many times. Very clearly, Rob is saying, a team official out there says, we offered a better offer than that. So it sounds like to me, if I'm interpreting everything, that the Eagles are taking any and all offers and they're considering their options, and there are teams out there who are annoyed about the process because there are certain teams that feel like they've already offered a fair trade offer, and maybe they don't like that the Eagles are taking their time.
I think there's definitely something to that, the way that this is being handled and how long it's taking, and maybe the communication isn't fantastic between Howie Roseman and some of the other teams that are making the phone call. Here's where I have the problem with this team official saying this. Now, this isn't anything to do with the report. I respect the report. It's more about the team official saying we made a better offer. Well, it might be to you, but but who's to say it's actually a better offer? So for everyone jumping on this tweet saying, oh, well, the Eagles got to pull the trigger then, well, he might think it's a better offer, but it doesn't mean it necessarily is. What if this individual thinks that a higher second-round pick, just one of them, is better than 2 later second-round picks?
Sure.
Maybe the Eagles don't value that the same way. So that's where I'm having the disconnect here with what the team official said, not so much the report itself.
And that's where I asked this question to Dave Weinberg a couple days ago on game night. And I've thought about this before. When you think about the situation that's going on, how much of what's going on is it really legitimate? Because a team can say the Eagles are asking for too much. Well, they ask you too much because they are actually asking for a lot, or is it because the team is not willing to give that up? Those are two different things to me, but someone can interpolate that and turn it into a report.
For sure. Yeah, I think you nailed it. All of this. Everything we're hearing, Josh, even from the Carson Wentz stuff, the Doug Peterson stuff, everything is all just a bunch of slop at the end of the day. Now, there's some truth to it, but, what you heard about Doug Peterson after he got fired, what you heard about Carson Wentz all season, what you're hearing about Howie, what you're hearing about these trades, all of it. All of this is leaking information. And once again, I don't really blame the writers for this because at the end of the day, you're told information. Your job then is to report that information.
All you have is what's told you.
Right.
You don't have anything else.
Right.
And especially since, remember, no one was allowed in the building this year.
Exactly.
Nobody has their normal contacts and research and information as usual. We are all flying blind together.
Exactly. And right. And when you look at this, like, while you do have to make sure what you're putting out there is, the best information. You can't just throw anything out there, but you can only control what you can control. If you are getting information from people inside and they tell you X, Y, and Z, your job is to then report X, Y, and Z. The problem is, though, they're controlling the narrative. They're controlling what they want to control. Because as you alluded to, you can't sneak around and start talking to others inside the NovaCare complex. And that's where all of these reporters are having an issue. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very difficult in this environment. But that's why, unfortunately, we're getting all of this crazy news because, you know what? Those people inside, they get an opportunity here to put their fingerprints all over the message.
Text board is open at 609-403-0973. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show, 973 ESPN. So if a team offered a better offer than the 2-2s and a third or fourth rounder or whatever exactly it is, because honestly that report is vague in and of itself, I feel that Mahdi's report is a little more substantive than that one. But if a team said we offered more than 2 second-round picks, then are the Eagles waiting on a better offer? Are they making calls? Are they letting the process play out? I know that Adam Caplan and Jeff Moshe talked about on the Inside the Birds podcast that the Bears and Colts are definitely involved. And then they mentioned on the pod that I was listening to that guess what? As Mike Gill mentioned, there's the Broncos out there. So now that's 3 teams out there. Well, we heard originally there were potentially 5 teams. And remember, Sam Darnold's available. Ryan Fitzpatrick's a free agent. The expectation there's going to be 4 or 5 quarterback drafts in the first round. Is Jimmy G getting traded? Cam Newton's a free agent. Does Matt Ryan get traded? And I feel like we forget that there's a bigger puzzle piece going on, and the Eagles and Wentz are just a piece of that bigger puzzle.
And let's say they did get this offer that's better than the 2 second-rounders and the third and fourth down the road possibly. You have to then start calling around to the teams that also offered and said, hey, this is what they're giving me. Would you like to counter? Would you like for someone to think that once you get that offer, it's all right, let's shake hands here and make it official right from the jump? That's silly. That's what a bad GM would do. You need to then call around to the other teams that offered something and say, hey, would you like to beat this? This is their offer. So then you use that as leverage. So I don't fault them for not jumping on it. But let's say the best offer is 2 second-rounders and this third and fourth. No matter what a team official said, maybe the Eagles don't value it that way. If the best possible offer you have is the 2 seconds and a third or fourth down the road, would you accept that offer for Carson Wentz?
The 2 second-round picks?
Yeah.
I would certainly try to get more.
Sure, I agree with that completely. But worst case scenario, that's the best offer at the end of the day. Is that enough for you to say, All right, look, that's just the market for a struggling Carson Wentz, and we knew it was going to be tough. This is the best they got. I'm okay with the second-round picks.
Yes and but. I want to know exactly what the parameters are of the deal beyond that.
What do you mean?
So, I have always had this question all along. Let's say a team is offering you the 2 second-round picks, but they also say, we are going to work with you to renegotiate Wentz's deal so you take a lesser cap hit. Like, for example, remember the Jags and Bears before the Foles trade was made? Foles renegotiated his deal so there was way less dead money. Because that was supposed to be, what, like $50 million dead cap hit? And then he got it down to, I think, almost like 20. And that was spread out, apparently, over 2 years. So, if there's a way, maybe a team says, look, we'll take Wentz, but we're giving you 2 second-round picks because we're going to take on the brunt of this money. Does that change the conversation?
Yes and no. That's a tough one. I mean, obviously, yes. The answer is yes, because that is a big part of this. The contract, the dead cap money. That's one of the reasons why Andrew Brandt was so damn hard on, this is not happening. You do not take that type of cap hit. So to act as if the financial part of this doesn't matter, well, that's silly, because it does, definitely. But I'm also looking at it selfishly from a draft pick compensation standpoint as well. And you can look at it from, well, if you're taking less dead money, that gives you the ability to maybe hold on to another player that you would have had to move on from, or maybe it allows you to sign a different player if you still get rid of the same players you would have anyway. So it does change, but I still selfishly look at the second-round draft picks as a way more valuable piece to the puzzle, if that makes sense. Whether that's right or wrong. I look at the compensation and draft picks more than I would the money side of things, even though I know the money side of things is important.
To me, I think the money side makes a difference in all of this. Okay? To me, the money side makes it's a part of the bigger puzzle. Because one of the questions is, you mentioned that people like Andrew Brandt wondering, how does the money work? And there's a lot of fans who are wondering, how does the money work? What if Howie turns to a team and gets them to take almost the entire brunt of the money, but he only walks away with 2 second-round picks? Does Howie get credit? Does Howie not get credit?
Well, the problem is the dead cap, right? So you're talking about if they restructure this thing?
What if they restructure this? So the Eagles walk away with this with, and I'm just throwing out a number, okay? Let's say $15 million in dead cap money.
Yeah, that's significantly different.
And the other team takes on all this money, but you only walk away with 2 second-round picks. See, I think that's where we need more information, because I don't know, like, the team says we offered a better deal. Well, did they offer a better deal, but did they also say we're not going to take on the full brunt of this money? Like, the Colts have $30 to $40 million on the cap to take a hit on, whereas the Bears don't. So is maybe the team that's saying we're going to offer 2 second-round picks to take on the money, or would you rather have the Eagles have this huge dead cap hit, but you walk away with a first-round pick and a player?
I think I'd rather have that, and here's why. I don't think this team is, like, legitimately going to win anything next year. So if you have to take a bigger cap hit for this upcoming season, I don't think that this is a legit team anyway. So it's almost like you're punting this year as it is, with all the dead cap, all the money, everything involved, the quarterback situation. So heading into this season with this mindset of, I don't think that this team is anything significant anyway, maybe it's better to get that first rounder and just take the dead cap anyway, because even if you fix the financial issue for next season, what's the difference? Maybe 5 wins instead of 6, or 5 wins instead of 7? You know what I mean? If you're not a playoff team anyway and you got to have to retool a little bit, would it be better for you to take on that higher draft pick and still pay the dead cap instead of the other way around?
To me, it depends on what your long-term plan is. Because if you're saying, look, we have a lot of holes on this roster, I need the cap space. But if you're someone who says we're one player away, I'm not as worried about the cap space. And that's why I'm considering this situation this way. Because to me, I don't think the Eagles are one player away from being a contender.
No, I agree with you. But wouldn't that almost make it so you keep Wentz's dead? Because the dead cap would be over after it's one heavy dead cap space, right? So after this year, it's no longer going to be in play, that dead cap money, that big money weighing you down.
Right.
So
and
if this team's not ready to compete, why don't you just take that dead cap hit for this season because you have so many holes that first-round pick might be better than the second-round picks? You know what I mean, though?
Right. And the other thing I would say is that, Jeffrey Lurie did admit that we are going to be in a bad cap situation for 1 year. He said that during his presser. Nick Sirianni was asked about that, and he kind of just pushed it away. But it seems like the messaging from the Eagles is we're willing to take a hit for 1 year to be better for the next 5 years. But does that satisfy Eagle fans?
I think so. I think you got to look at this at where they're at. This is where they're at now. It's like the Daryl Morey thing, right? It's funny how the perspectives change when it's a different team. To expect Daryl Morey to just come in here and with the snap of your fingers, this team is like people are complaining about Danny Green. This team's a good team. Don't get me wrong, but they're not that. Daryl Morey still has moves to make to really make this work, and you got to get rid of Al Horford. Well, you got to take back Danny Green and Ferguson. Once they're off the books next year, now you have more money for Daryl Morey to work with to help your team out and really take that significant jump. So Daryl Morey's not finished yet. For where the Eagles are, to think that Howie Roseman can snap his fingers and automatically make it work just from one Carson Wentz move, that's not realistic. So it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of adapt again and retool this bad boy. It's not a snap of the fingers fix. So Eagles fans need to realize that they are now in this situation, and for you to demand for it to all be different in just 1 year, I think that that's a little ridiculous. I'm not one of those, by the way, Josh. I'm not one of those people that think they're 5-6 years in hell. But I think it's more than just, hey, the offensive line needs to be fixed. I think it's more of like a next year will be tough, and then we can talk about what the following year might be. But I think next year you're kind of in for a stressful, maybe not as entertaining season.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on a TGIF Friday here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, text board is open at 609-403-0973. We also get your comments on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as you watch the show on 97.3 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to get in on the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, the latest report from Rob Maaddi. NFL team official is telling him that the report that the Eagles' best offer was 2 second-round picks and potentially a third or a fourth. The official told Maaddi, we made a better offer. That says to me that there's a reason why Howie Roseman hasn't made a deal yet. And it's because he's still working the phones. He's still letting the thing play out. And you know what? If that's the case, I'm fine with that. I'd rather him make the best deal than make the first deal.
No doubt about it. This is called making big trades in the NFL. So to demand it to happen right now, I'm just as frustrated as anybody else. And selfishly, I look at this as I do want this to be over because the Carson Wentz watch, if you will, is starting to get a little tiresome, and I am getting annoyed by it. But I know how this process works. If for everyone who hates Howie Roseman, and I don't love him by any means, and then I tend to be more on the, hey, it's time to refresh things up a bit, but for the people that just despise everything he does, if he was to pull the trigger on the first option, that would be worse. That would be what a bad GM does. You don't want your GM to say, oh, yeah, no doubt, this is the first offer. Let's move on and let's get ready to roll. That's silly. That's silly.
Get a couple comments in here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Those watching the show at 973 ESPN. Big D says over there on YouTube, 2 seconds for Carson isn't enough to trade him away. Now, he's drawing a line. He's saying, look, that is not enough. He's putting his foot down on YouTube, to which I say I would tend to agree with you, but I want to know, like I said before, is that team going to work with you to renegotiate all the contract to absorb the brunt of the money? Because to me, saving potentially $20 to $30 million on your cap means another player or two or three.
Yeah, I'm not against this trade. I'm not happy. I'm not saying, wow, this is something that really satisfies me. But knowing, we talk about where's the line. What's the line that we draw? This fits in that line, but it's closer to the, I don't know, than it is the, oh yeah, I'm ready to move forward with this one. But it is in that window where I would say yes. Because you got to think about it. You'd have your 6th overall pick, and then you would have 3 second-rounders. Maybe you package 2 up and you move up or whatever. But to act as if getting 4 players in the first 2 rounds, I mean, I can't act as if that's – no one wants this. This isn't ideal. But for the situation, if you tell me you get 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, I think we got to start retooling, and that's the way you got to do it.
Now, it's funny you say that because the other side of Big D's comment is this. He also says, I don't trust Howie making these picks. See, that's another side of this. Because another side of it is, if you're someone who is against Howie Roseman, are you saying, I don't care if I get more picks because I don't trust the guy getting the picks to make the right pick? That's a whole nother side of this.
I don't have the biggest faith in the world in him just based off of recent stuff. I mean, you can bring up what he did in the past, and that's fine. I'm not pretending that doesn't matter. But as of recent, it hasn't been the strongest stretch for Howie Roseman
but here's
in that
the
area.
thing, and this is my counter. I've heard multiple people say this in the last week and a half because, obviously the Eagles situation has been on everywhere. So I turn on NFL Network, Good Morning Football, it's there. I turn Get Up on ESPN, it's there. I flip on a podcast like with Albert Breer of SI. It's there. Everywhere I go, someone has something to say. But I've heard multiple people say the same thing. Howie can draft certain positions, but not others. And in their opinions, people who are not covering the team every day like we are, like Mosher and Caplan and those guys in our area are, the outsiders are saying Howie might not be able to draft wide receivers, but he can draft tight ends, he can draft offensive linemen, he can draft defensive linemen. So, is there any consolation in saying if the Eagles stick with their bread and butter, those picks can be something worthwhile?
Well, from everything I'm hearing is Lurie has input, and there's no denying it, and there's times where he does not overstep, but his influence is clearly noticed. And
that he has more influence than we would like.
Yes, but Howie has a lot to say, and I just feel that for the people that look at it as, well, Lurie's making all those picks, while there might be truth to it in certain areas, Howie Roseman still has a serious amount, like an insane amount of power up at the top as well, to the point where I can't deflect that. I know that it's there.
You can't ignore it.
I can't. I know it might not be every pick, but he is up there making some serious decisions. So just to go on the point of he's going to mess it up anyway, I might not have the biggest faith in the world that it delivers the way that I want it to, but to take myself out of that position to even have that opportunity, I'm not going to say, you know what, I don't want draft picks because I don't trust my GM. You can't do that. That's not the right way to build this thing. So sadly, you're in a situation where you have to trust the guy that you don't have a lot of trust in. But to say I don't want draft picks because of that, unfortunately, this is the way that it has to be done.
We got Chris Hernandez watching on Facebook at 973 ESPN. It says, I believe Howie's going to get the best offer for Wentz. I think Wentz staying is going to be toxic for the locker room. We need to move forward. That's from Chris Hernandez watching on Facebook.
I can't imagine a situation where he stays.
See, that's the thing. And can we get that real quick? I keep hearing some people say, I don't think Wentz is going anywhere. I agree with Sal Powell from yesterday. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. At some point, you got to realize, whatever phrase you want to use, toothpaste attitude, cat is out of the bag, whatever term you want to use, I feel like we're too far down the road to make a return. To me, there's no redemption here. To me, there's no marriage counseling. This is a divorce, and we're just waiting for the paperwork to be signed.
Unless he does come back, but not to play. He comes back, and I kind of mentioned this to Andrew DeCecco, and he's like, well, then Carson Wentz won't show up. But, I mean, that's only hurting his stock more than anything, and then the team can fine him and things of that nature. What if they hold out, not to play him, so not to fix things, but, hey, we're going to do what's best for this organization. We'll trade you when it's time to trade you. Is it possible?
I just don't think that'll happen because I think that both sides want this done.
I think it's a reach, but I'm not going to rule it out.
And I would say that NFL teams, they're going to want to make a decision soon. Because I told you earlier, there's a lot of names on the market. And I'm going to throw out some names in the next segment, and you can tell me who's going to get a bigger return. Because I would guesstimate there's at least 2 quarterbacks who are available, if not 3, who are going to get a bigger return on a trade than Carson Wentz will. Not because Carson Wentz doesn't have value, but because of who those players are. So keep that in the back of your mind. We'll get to more of your messages on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, like Chris Hernandez. We got guys like Joe. We got Al. We got Murphy. We got more guys on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter watching the show. Also, you can text in at 609-403-0973 into the Sports Bash.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash along with Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. You can see us live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show. You can comment on the show in real time at 973 ESPN. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Don't forget the website, 973ESPN.com, for all your Eagles, Sixers, Flyers, and Phillies coverage. Also, for the text board, 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN. Before we get back to the comments, I did want to mention this real quick. I think it is a little funny, not to be too ridiculous. I do think there's an element to this that is really funny. That is, we were told it was come in the coming days, but no one ever said how many days the coming days would be. But people assumed that meant like tomorrow.
Well, when it happens, when you say it's close, right? On a Saturday, the news dropped, right? The day before the Super Bowl. It's now Friday. You don't say close is 3 days.
To be honest with you, I'm a little confused on what day was what when Schefter versus this person versus that person reported what. I think it was actually Friday that Schefter made the first, it's coming soon, it's imminent, it's close, or whatever he said. And then that was expounded upon on Saturday and Sunday. I think that's how it went.
Yeah, well, at that point, once it passes that following Wednesday, you lied to me. That's how I take it. That's
so
my
you're
cutoff.
saying Schefter's a liar.
No, I'm saying close to me. And it's all subjective, right? But close to me, if you tweet that out on Friday, it better be done by Wednesday.
Well, listen, it's like the George Lopez joke. You know, not right now, but later right now I can do it. But right now, I'm busy.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Shame on Schefter. He should have been thinking about my feelings.
Let's get more comments in. Watching the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We got Al watching the show on Facebook. I agree with you, Josh. Well, that's a first. There is allegedly a wild card team in the mix. Hold the cards until it's time to call.
Yeah, I feel the same way, just to be clear. I think that they should hold out until they get their best possible offer. Now, here's where the problem comes in. What if that 2 second-round picks, which in theory is your best offer, and I'm playing it as if what that team official said by Rob Maaddi, maybe the Eagles don't view that as the best offer. So, if your best offer of 2 second-rounders and a third or fourth down the road is, hey, you have a time clock until we are pulling this offer out. At what point, Josh, do you say, fine, we will take it? Or do you hold your cards close to your chest and say, fine, take those 2 second-rounders off the table. I don't care. I'm going out and getting more. Because let's say the Colts have that on the table, and they say, I need an answer by Friday at 6 p.m.
If it's the Colts and it's a better offer, then I take it. If it's the Bears and it's a better offer, I don't. And here's why. Chris Ballard is not a snowflake. He is not a pushover. He is a bona fide NFL lifer front office guy. He is a no-nonsense, I'm honest with you guy. Ryan Pace, the GM of the Bears, is a desperate, my butt is on the hot seat guy who's made bad decisions before. So if it's the Colts, as you said, then I kind of have to roll with them. But if it's the Bears telling me that, I'm not listening to you. You're a desperate idiot. You gave up a huge amount of assets to trade up to one spot to pick Mitch Trubisky. I can't trust you to tell me this is my final offer because you'll come crawling back to you with a more desperate offer.
That's what I was going to say. You could probably find a way to say, you know what, fine, we'll walk away then, and that would still have the Bears crawling back.
Ryan Pace is the Jags GM from draft day. When Kevin Costner calls him and has to convince him, this is a good deal. I'm telling you, I'm going to help save you. Go on, don't mess with me. I got a good deal for you. That's Ryan Pace. Ryan Pace is so desperate to not screw up and keep his job. I think Howie could fleece him. But if it's the Colts saying that, you're not fleecing Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard is a bona fide man among boys in terms of NFL GMs.
All right, so if the Colts had that on the table and said, I'm walking away, Well, then, boom, you would pull the trigger. GM Josh Hennig would pull the trigger, and he'd probably be booed out of town by this fan base. Boo! I think you can handle it, though. You can handle the criticism that Howie gets, can't you?
I think I have thicker skin than Carson Wentz.
Then Carson, but what about Howie's soft?
Well, see, I don't know. What is Howie? Because I don't hear from him enough.
Howie cares.
Does he?
Howie cares about how he is perceived. Too much.
Then I have more of a thick skin than Howie does.
Everyone thinks Carson has soft skin, which, fine. I think it's valid to say that. But if you think he's bad, Howie is, Howie cares. It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But he continues to, and that's why you see a lot of these leaked reports. For example, and even Moshe was saying this when he was on at Football 4 last week, these reports afterward, as soon as Doug Peterson gets fired, there's a report out there that Howie Roseman wanted Jefferson and Doug was the one that wanted Rager. That's a Howie Roseman leak for you. That's a Howie Roseman trying to build up that whatever the wall, I guess.
Well, it's
from
also
the people
Howie
that hated
protecting
him.
Jeffrey Lurie, because the original report was that, remember, Jeffrey Lurie wanted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Remember that report?
Yes, I do.
So, how much of this also is Howie protecting his owner because he knows where his bread is buttered?
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part of this for sure.
609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, you comment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, watching the show. Just like another one. Yeah, that's actually the handle. Another one says on YouTube, Eagles aren't going to get what the Lions got because the Rams were trading away Goff's contract. Now, that is true. The Goff contract was a part of the reason why they gave up those picks. It's like the Brock Osweiler. They had to give up a second-round pick to get the Browns to take on that gargantuan contract. So, yes, you're not going to get 2 first-round picks, a player, and a third-round pick and considerations and blah. I get that. You're not getting all of that. But I think you can get better, though, than 2 second-round picks. And by the way, that's what Rob Mattei's report said. His report said that the report was the Eagles' best offer was 2 second-round picks, and another team told him, we made a better offer than that. So, obviously, there's a better offer out there.
Would you rather have the 38th overall pick or 2 later second-round picks? So, one second-round pick, but closer to the first round?
Yes.
Or 2 that might be more in the back
closer
end?
to the first round.
Okay.
Because every year there's this leak over of first-round talent in like the first 10 to 12 picks in the second round.
Well, what if it was a middle of the second round pick to start it off and then one towards the late? Like, what if your best of the 2 second-round picks was in the middle of the second round? Not to the back, but in the middle of that second round.
I'm not liking that as much.
Okay, you're not liking that as much.
I feel like every year, if you go through the NFL draft and look at who the prospects were going into the draft versus where they were drafted, every year there's like 10 to 12 picks in the second round that are guys who could have gone in the first round. So if you get like the 35th, 38th, 39th pick, that's almost like a late first-round pick in terms of talent.
Yeah, definitely, but I think you can still find that throughout, right? I mean, there's plenty of guys in the later half of that second round. I'm just thinking of last year, for example, right? Like, if you land a guy like Jeremy Chin, and he was where Jalen Hurts was, that's where maybe people were kind of looking at going in that direction. If you snag 2 players like that, would that be better than that 1 player that you were talking about? I still think that there's enough value in that second round that I would have to think about it. I don't know what I would do right now if you ask me, because I see so much value in both. But I'm not writing off the 2 second-rounders, even if they're later picks.
Can I give you some of the high second-round picks from this past draft?
Yes.
T. Higgins, good year. Michael Pittman of the Colts, good year. DeAndre Swift, now the starting running back for the Lions. Xavier McKinney, started a pretty good amount of games for the Giants. Kyle Duggar, not the best pick, but that was a Patriots pick, so I guess Belichick's an idiot, right? Gross Matos from Penn State didn't really have a huge impact this year, but he got some playing time. You got Robert Hunt, who went to the Dolphins, guy who gave you some offensive line depth. How about Ross Blaylock? That's a guy who got some playing time. Jonathan Taylor, huge year for the Colts, 41st pick. And then the 12th pick of the second round, how about Laviska Shenault?
Oh.
Fantasy football players love Shenault.
How about that?
So those first 12 picks, you can get something there. You can get somebody legitimate. So to me, high second round is very different than late second round.
I'm not disagreeing with that. Of course, the higher in the round, but I just wonder, because of all the holes, and I don't want to make it seem like the Sam Hinkie effect of having more opportunities to land the guy. I almost feel more comfortable that you have 2 second-rounders because, hey, if you do grab that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, maybe Dallas Goedert is that second pick. So you might whiff on one of the second round. It gives you another opportunity to land a guy because as we always go through it, these draft picks aren't as easy to hit as maybe we think they are. So it just gives you another opportunity to. And it's still the second round where there's enough talent that would satisfy me. It would be different if we're talking about high third compared to late third or high fourth compared to late fourth. Once you start diving into those rounds, it's a different conversation. But it's almost like you have more darts to throw, if you will. And there's just so many holes, too. And maybe if you're lucky, you hit on both, and then you fill both of those holes. You know, you just never know. So, I don't know. I see value in both sides, though.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on a TGIF edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, text board is open, 609-403-0977. We got a ton of messages on Facebook, YouTube, and we're trying to get through all of them right now. Murphy Brown, I'm only bringing up Murphy's comment because I want to give a little clarity to it. Murphy says on YouTube, Chip Kelly drafted Lane while Howie drafted Lillard. That's not true. So, just a little history. The first draft was Howie's draft, the first year Chip Kelly, because the idea was that Kelly didn't fully understand the league yet, so they let Howie manage the first draft. Because a couple years earlier, the Eagles went to Howie's draft board instead of Andy Reid's draft board, and that's how you ended up with Fletcher Cox. Now, Andy was the guy who signed off on Fletcher, but that was, quote-unquote, Howie's draft board. So the idea of drafting Lane and drafting Zach Ertz, those were Howie's picks. Now, yes, Howie's pick is also Dillard. But Dillard was also considered the best pass-blocking offensive lineman in that draft. And don't forget, there are people who believe that Dillard was a Joe Douglas pick, that was the top offensive lineman on Joe Douglas's board.
I lean more towards that side of the argument than, people. I just remember that there was not like a huge knock, like how dare they, but there were a couple eyebrow raises with the Dillard one. How would it translate in the run game? There were
right, because they never ran the ball at Washington State.
Exactly. So I would, if you're going to argue Howie, not Howie, I would lean more towards the argument of Joe Douglas more so than the Andre Dillard pick in itself of, this guy was reasonable to pick in that moment kind of thing. But, no, I think that's interesting. And I thought it was brought up well yesterday or maybe the day before. The way I feel about Howie, I think, is perfectly described with Andy Reid. When Andy Reid was here, no matter what all the joke of the people say out there, Andy Reid was very successful. Yeah. But there was a time where it was time. And I just feel with Howie, while I'm not saying everything he does is awful, because I think that take is terrible, but I just think it's time. I just think it's time to kind of get fresh. So the problem is, you might ask, well, who then? And I don't have that information. I don't know who would be the best to step in. I would have to trust Jeffrey Lurie to find that next Joe Banner, Howie Roseman.
That's the other side of the coin, and that is I think Howie has this job in part because he does exactly what Lurie wants and because Lurie trusts him. So even if they never would have won a Super Bowl in 2017, I think Lurie still is keeping the guy. But now he's got that Super Bowl ring. It gives Howie even more clout in the owner's eyes. And it would take a massive, self-destruct mode.
And then we're not here?
No.
Well, we're pretty close to it.
No, we're
But that's
not.
why I think and I brought this up before. This is where Howie is. He's looking at both sides of that railroad track. Left is one way and right is the other way. And right now we started this dumpster fire fall. He can either fix that or it's...
Make it worse.
Yeah, so I do think he's on the last straw. I really do feel that Jeffrey Lurie's feeling the pressure of the fan base. That also has to be acknowledged, that there is pressure now with Howie more than it's ever been before, where if this continues to be self-destruction, which it is on the path. Now, it can get redirected, but it's on the path. This is do or die mode for Howie. I really do believe that. I think anything less than 7 wins, I think Howie Roseman's gone. 6-10 and worse, I think Howie Roseman's gone. I really do believe that.
I think it has to be worse than 6-10.
So would 5-11 do it?
I think it might.
Okay, so you would say 5-11 and down. Right. Yeah, 6-10's playing with that. If Jeffrey Lurie wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, maybe.
I genuinely think that this organization is planning on having a losing season this year.
They probably are.
And if they have a winning season, they'll be pleasantly surprised. kind of thing.
So then it's a punt year, and they acknowledge that. So maybe it's more about what happens the following season that would tell you about Howie and the future.
But I think that this roster is good enough to get you 6-7 wins if they're healthy.
I could get behind 6 or 7
Because to
wins.
me, if Lane, Brooks, and Kelsey are all healthy, and let's say Mailata is your left tackle, and you trade – I'm just running a scenario. You trade – so let's say the whole offensive line is healthy for the majority of the year because they have been in the past. They haven't been this injured before. I mean, 13 line combinations is ungodly bad amount of injuries. If the offensive line is healthy and you use Miles Sanders better and Rager is used more appropriately, all right, and let's say, I don't know, they add a cornerback, let's say, I can see them going 7-9, 8-8. I don't think that's beyond reason.
I don't think so either. Also because Giants, Washington, they're beatable teams. I mean, it would be different if you're, I don't know, let's say you're the Lions and you got to go up against a Green Bay Packers team where you're like, okay, we're going to write off 2 losses there, whatever the case may be. You know, you have an opportunity to win some games in the division, which definitely does help. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, they're not a 4-win team. Their roster's not 4-win bad. I think they're more in that 6-7 range than most. But it's just, I really do think that Howie is on a straw that maybe we're not used to seeing out of him. People say he's never going to be gone. Well, they said the same thing about Joe Banner. And at some point, Joe Banner left, and you then had Howie. So why can't Laurie now do what he did with Joe Banner to find Howie with Howie and the next guy?
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. You need to match just one number, 1 to 15, to win cash pop from the New Jersey Lottery. The more numbers you play, the better your odds of winning. So pop in and play, because anything can happen in Jersey. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free for all your Eagles, Sixers, Flyers, and NFL coverage. Everything you need, even high school sports, we got you covered at 97.3 ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll get back to more of your thoughts and comments on the stream. Don't forget, still to come, Paul Hudrick with Inside the Sixers at 3:20. NFL insider Adam Caplan at 4. UFC Welterweight champion Kamaru Usman, who fights at UFC 258 tomorrow night, coming up at 5:20 tonight. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash TGIF Friday edition, alongside Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN, at Broads81 on Twitter, at Josh Hennig on Twitter, 97.3 ESPN. We'll be back to more of your messages and comments at 609-403-0973. Again, the big news that popped off before we came on the air, AP's Rob Monty's reporting. An NFL team official told him about reports that the Eagles' best offer for Wentz was 2 second-round picks plus a potential 3rd or 4th. Quote, we made a better offer. We don't know what better means, but he claims it was a better offer.
Very subjective.
It is very subjective. Your better offer may not be better than my better offer.
Exactly.
My best offer might be better than your best offer, but your best offer may be what the Eagles are looking for.
Do you think it's possible it happens over the weekend? Or do you think this type of move is I don't know. Are the Eagles strategically planning this to happen on a weekend?
I think they're just letting it play out. I do. I think if they were worried about time frame, they would have done this already.
Why not? Why though? This is the perfect time. A nice news dump at Friday, 5 o'clock.
But this isn't a news dump. This is Carson Wentz.
They might think of it differently, though. Imagine this dropping Monday compared to a Friday or a Saturday. It's not the same reaction because people have time to kind of let it digest. And then Monday, while obviously it's going to be a hot conversation, there's a level of it already kind of settled into people to a degree.
Listen, the reason why I don't think they care is because I remember when the Sam Bradford news dropped. I was here working at 97.3 ESPN. I was actually working Billy Schweim's show back in 2016. And I had to show Billy that the Sam Bradford news broke. And I was like, Billy, look. And he's like, what?
Yeah, it's not in the newspaper, Josh.
It was the middle of the morning. It was like 10:50 in the morning.
Here's the difference, though. That was a move that was, like, no one would have been mad. No one was upset. You got Carson Wentz to now play. This is such a different spot. Like, that Sam Bradford move, everyone was, like, now excited after the move because not only did you get the first, but now you're getting to see Carson Wentz play. This move is, we're dumping the franchise quarterback that has a $34 million cap hit out the window for compensation that isn't really the value that you went up and got him at. So, you know what I mean, though? It's like one was a positive towards Howie and the organization. The other is a downfall of where they are. It's a black cloud, if you will, that's over top of the franchise. So it's got a different perspective on it. I think they're worried. They are worried about how they are perceived. So
yeah, but I don't know if I 100% agree with that for this reason. They're so tone deaf on certain things. You know what I mean? Like, they are so oblivious to optics sometimes. There are things that Doug Peterson and Howie and Jeffrey Lurie have said over just the last year that you're looking around like, did they really just say that?
See, I don't think they're oblivious. I just think it constantly keeps happening. They're aware that it's happening. I just think they lost control on how to not make it happen. Because they know the story.
They have bad PR people.
Yeah, man,
and you know what? I don't think that the PR people of the Eagles are stupid. I just think that Howie, Jeffrey, Doug, and Phil, and Nick Sirianni, and everybody else, and whoever else you want to lump into this conversation, I just don't think they care as much as we think they do.
Oh, they care.
You know, they care about being liked.
Yes, they do.
They don't
do
care as much about the full perception of them, though. Because if they did, they would say things differently. They would handle things differently.
I think they tried
like,
to.
If Jeffrey Lurie really cared that much, he would have taken questions at Sirianni presser.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with...
Instead, he was just like, I'm getting out of here. I'm not dealing with this. Sirianni, good luck.
Well, no, I think he did that to take a bullet for his coach. So because they were looking at, the press conference was X amount of time. When they just look at it from that standpoint.
Also, if
cutting Sirianni off pretty much.
Right, but also Howie would have been there. Where was Howie? If Howie cares what people think about him as much as we're inferring.
Well, you don't change that in a presser at this point. That's more about the only thing that changes perception is the moves.
Be out in front. Like, one of the reasons why there was a segment of people who hated Sam Hinkie wasn't because they really hated Sam Hinkie. They hated the fact that they perceived that he was aloof and he didn't want to take questions and he didn't want to deal with the media, which it came out to be that he didn't think it was important, but he realized later that maybe the situation would be better if he would have handled the media a little bit differently. But the fact that he was, absent without leave, they left Brett Brown take all the questions, the bullets all the time, and Hinkie was quote unquote too busy with the process. That creates a perception problem. If Howie was more visible and more out front, I think he could help the perception of him a little bit.
I don't think so. I think it's more about what he does, not so much what he says. So for me, obviously during the Sam Hinkie era and Brett Brown being thrown under the bus to have to answer certain questions, that's obviously not a great look, and they should have handled that differently. But for Howie, I think Howie's so deep in that we're at a different discussion for him specifically based on the difference in the two parties here. And with him, he won't be able to say a damn thing that convinces anybody anything. At this point, it's show me, do something, draft the right guy, put together this team again like you did in 2017. I think for him, it's really all actions. While it can't hurt to say certain things, for me at least, I feel that Howie Roseman, it's not so much about what he says at this point. It's just action. Do it. Go do it. Go execute.
Connor Spencer, watching the show on YouTube, says Howie gets another 2 seasons at least. Now, that's interesting because you were asking, does a win record define it? Well, Connor is saying he gets 2 seasons no matter what it seems like.
If it's a 1 or 2 win season, 3 win season, I think it's possible. Look, this is the same organization that fires people who makes the playoffs. Right. Doug Peterson made the playoffs 3 out of 4 years, won a Super Bowl, and bang, you're gone. You're out of here. So
I just think the ground rules are different for Howie because of his relationship with Jeff.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all. And
I think Connor brings up an interesting point. What if the Eagles don't get back to the playoffs for 2 years? Maybe you agree, okay, they punt on the 1 year. But what if it's 2 years? Then you got to look at Howie and be like, bro, come on.
Definitely. Even if
you are Jeffrey Lurie.
Yeah, public enemy number 1 is Howie. And I just feel I don't want my owner feeling the fan base at times because you want to make your own logical decisions. But I do think that there would be pressure if 2 years from now we are out of the playoffs next year and out of the playoffs the year after that with this whole Nick Sirianni hire, which at that point you're saying 2 years of Nick Sirianni, you're not in the playoffs. You might feel that pressure to make that move. And at some point, I always hate to go against the bang on the table people. Because here's the thing. They say it for 25 years, so they're wrong for 24. But then there's that 1 year where they are right that you have to admit, like, well, when you say it enough, you're eventually going to be right.
Well, it's like when you and Gil talked the other day, and I'm not trying to rehash.
No, that's fine. I think the next day after we have enough time to digest and approach it differently
really
after
quick,
the fire.
Like, when we talked about the different teams in the NFC, the Giants got to the Super Bowl 3 times over 21 years. But outside of those 3 seasons, they were a mediocre to poor football team. Whereas the Eagles, over the same stretch, went to 2 Super Bowls, won 1, lost 1, and were mostly a winning football team. Do we look at the Eagles and Giants any differently because of that? I don't know if we do, because to me, the problems with both franchises still exist, right? Like, and then this is where I kind of fell between you and Gil with the conversation the other day. To me, I'm not going to say the Giants are a better or worse team just because of their track record. And to me, it's the same with the Eagles. When you bring up track record, we can discuss track record. But to me, I'm not going to sit here and act like Howie Roseman is any better or worse than I already think he is, because I know what his track record is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I absolutely respect that side of the thing. And to a degree, I almost think that I could use that side to benefit some of my points. But at the same time, I think that can also benefit some of Gil's thoughts as well. But I think it's, like you said, it's kind of right in the middle. I do understand. It's like, I can relate that to the Sixers almost. Last night, people are like, oh, they need more. Well, that game last night, you should have known that you needed more. I already knew what I needed to know about this team prior.
You didn't need last night to
tell me that. Exactly. And that's how you feel about Howie.
It's the same thing with Howie. For me, at least. I'm not speaking for you. I'm saying for me specifically. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN on the Sports Bash on a TGIF Friday. I know what Howie is. I know that there's really almost no one better than him as well. There's maybe a handful of GMs who are legitimately
Well, that's
great.
not necessarily true. Because at some point, Howie Roseman wasn't nobody that walked on as this guy. Like, you can, just because we might not know who they are, that's on Lori now to find that next guy who are available.
But hear me out for a second. Okay, the Bucs won the Super Bowl. Jason Light was here in the Eagles organization.
Tom Brady. That's such a big factor.
Yeah,
I think that's the outlier.
But he had to sell Brady on it. I don't think Brady woke up one day and be like,
I don't like that.
Be a great team.
I don't like that
Bucs.
example. I don't like that example.
Okay, fine. Brett Veach with the Chiefs. Is that Veach or is that Reed?
Well, that's why I like that you brought that up. That's why I struggle with the track record of Howie, because 20 years, we talk about this 20-year window. Andy Reid was such a big chunk of that.
Right,
so
to me, you got to take out 10 years.
Yeah, I agree.
To me, well, first of all,
which
Andy Reid.
still supports.
Banner.
Yeah, fair.
It was Banner and Reid from about 99 to 2010, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like 2010, 2011, the falling out between Banner and Laurie happened. And then Howie gets semi-promoted. And then there was a year or two where Reid had those rough drafts. And he makes Luis Castillo the defensive coordinator, and we have the dream team. And then they said, we're going to Howie's draft board. And then they draft Fletcher Cox. But then they get rid of Andy. And then they say, Howie, you got to handle the draft. But then Chip says, I don't like Howie. Then we got to take out 2 more years out of the resume. Because Chip's out there drafting Nelson Aguilar and Marcus Smith.
My favorite.
And Joe Walker from Oregon. Remember that? So, like, you have all these guys that Chip guys, that Chip Kelly people. We're going to get rid of Deshaun Jackson because I don't like him. And we're going to trade LaShawn McCoy because I don't like him. That wasn't Howie. That was Chip being an egomaniac freakazoid. So then Howie is brought, as Jason Kelsey said, brought back from the closet down the hall, right? And then he's the one who went up and got Carson Wentz. He's the one who drafted Big V and Seumalo. And he's the one who went out there and acquired Alshon Jeffrey and LeGarrette Blount and Chris Long. So on one hand, Howie does some good things. So he's not all good, he's not all bad. But the problem is that I can say that about all these teams. I just mentioned earlier, the Patriots made a horrible pick in the second round. The guy did nothing. Am I going to sit here and be like, Bill Belichick's a bum? No.
No, but I think we're going to see. I brought this up before, like with Bruce Arians, right? If Bruce Arians wins a Super Bowl next year, hypothetically, with Tom Brady, whether this is right or wrong, maybe I'm the outlier, but I'm going to start looking at Bill Belichick and go, hold on a second.
Oh, sure you
Hold on a second. You know what I mean? Now Bruce Arians goes from a respected coach to a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and that insanely builds your resume to something different, right? Like, I mean,
there's a ton of guys who have 1 ring. There's a much smaller group that have 2 rings.
Right. So with Belichick, now like all these draft picks, oh, he's a genius. How much of those draft picks was just Tom Brady working with because it's Tom Brady?
Right.
So does my perception change on Bill Belichick in this draft?
Does he come down a notch?
For sure.
And by the way, the flip side happens with Howie Roseman. What if the Eagles with Sirianni make another Super Bowl run? Maybe they don't win it. But what if they get back to another Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts and Sirianni and Roseman? That also changes your perception of Howie.
Definitely.
But on the flip side, you know what also changes your perception? If they go to the playoffs for the next 10 years and they don't get the Super Bowl.
Right.
So all these things, as you said, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'm so curious how this Howie thing is. I think the seat is hotter than it's ever been. I know we keep talking about him being like an untouchable guy, but I always date back to we said the same thing about Banner. And eventually it was just time. And I do feel we are starting to hit that territory, whether it's 1 year, 2 years. We are starting to hit that territory of Howie better show it to Jeffrey Lurie, not to the fan base, whatever, to Jeffrey Lurie. He better show that he has a grasp on this thing, or I really do think Howie's going to be gone in a 2-year span or so. If it gets ugly, I mean, if it continues down this path, I could see it.
Right, because at the end of the day, the fan perception of Howie is not 100% reality.
True.
Because the fans are not in the meetings with Howie and Jeffrey Lurie. We don't know how much of what we think is Howie might be Lurie, and how much of Lurie might be Howie, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of overlap and minutia and gray area that we just don't know about. That's why I want the 30 for 30 on the Eagles. I don't care about the process. I need to know the tell-all book of Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, and the rise and fall of Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm right there with you. You don't have to preach to the choir. I can't believe all those people out there are choosing the Sixers over this. This is what you need to know. You want to get behind the scenes, a sit down. How about not like a Tom Rinaldi. That's too sad. And I'm thinking of golf or something where they like show the B-roll of the golf course and then a soft-spoken voice. I don't want something like that. I want someone to drill him. Tell me. Almost like I don't want to get this harsh, but you put a rag over his face and then you pour water on it and then you rip it off. Sort of like what you do with, bad people out there.
You mean waterboarding?
Yeah, exactly. You just rip it off. Tell me, Howie, what did you do? Rip the rag off of his mouth.
So you want it to be the guy who's done Hard Knocks the last couple of years is the guy from Ray Donovan, Liv Schreiber. You want Liv Schreiber.
Give me that.
As your commentator.
Give me that.
A little gruffness, but a little ability to have the balance back and forth in telling the story.
Yeah, maybe even worse. A little more intense.
You want even more intense?
Yeah, a little more intense, a little more aggressive.
I mean, who else is there? I mean, I'm trying to think of guys who do narration.
Well, no, I think we got to think outside the box. Someone who's never done it. Maybe like FBI, like people behind. Like we got to get serious with
Sal
this.
Palantonio?
Is he too involved though? He's too involved and
you
connected.
Want someone completely uninvolved?
Oh yeah, I want someone
walking in the room.
Yes, and making this serious, as if you're under investigation. That's what we're doing here. None of this like, hey Howie, tell us what happened. No. This is, you walk around him a couple of times, you stare at him without saying a few words. You got to make this guy feel uncomfortable so he gives you the details. This is what I'm talking about. None of this nonsense like, hey, let's respect this. No. There's no respect in this documentary. Maybe I should do it, Josh. Maybe I should do this.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt Nissan is now open at Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot. Visit them online at mattblattnissan.com. We're going to change it up a little bit next inside the Sixers with Paul Hudrick. The Sixers did lose the game last night with a horrible inbounds play. Sixers game 3 of their road trip tomorrow afternoon. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Don't go anywhere. We will get back to the Eagles talk. We got tons of comments to get to on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and at 609-403-0973 on the text board. Along with Hunter Brody, I am Josh Hennig, filling for Mike Yell here on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Yell here on the Sports Bash on a TGIF Friday. on 97.3 ESPN, along with Hunter Brody, at Broads81 on Twitter, at Josh Hennig on Twitter. Joining us right now on the Boardwalk on a Hot Live and live virtually, Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider, joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN and live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Paul, how you doing on this Friday?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you, man?
Doing pretty good. So, first of all, we got to get to, before we get to anything else, and you talked about this a little bit this morning on another show, about the inbounds play from last night. I think a lot of people, no matter what would have happened in that game, let's say the Sixers came back and won in overtime, they would still be talking about that inbounds play. And I think the perception is, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I saw a lot on Twitter last night, people with the attitude of, you told me that Dave Yeager and Doc Rivers were these great coaches, and these doggone players couldn't do an inbounds play, was kind of like the attitude of Sixers Twitter last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny, too, because, I mean, people will bark about how bad Brett Brown's out-of-timeouts plays were, but it was a year ago in Portland that he drew up a play that Furkan Korkmaz hit a game-winning shot, and Al Horford set a great screen to get Furkan Korkmaz open. But, yeah, I mean, listen, it's one play, it's one game. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. Yes, Doc Rivers likely could have drawn up a better play. Steph Curry slipped. Tobias Harris looked like he got tugged by Carmelo Anthony. Maybe he could have done a better job coming to the ball. Maybe Ben Simmons could have found a better pass to Danny Green. It's one of those things. It was a bad play. It was a bad play on a lot of levels. But for me, I think all the energy that we're spending on that play, the game wasn't lost on that play. The game was lost throughout the game, really in that third quarter into the fourth quarter stretch where Carmelo Anthony went off and the Sixers bench gave them nothing last night. And the disparity of 3-point shots. I mean, Portland hit almost 3 times as many threes. So, yeah, we can dissect that ATO until we're blue in the face, but to me, the game was not lost there. The game was lost well before that.
Yeah, I agree. The way that I see this loss is when Trent Jr. hit that three-pointer and Dame put them up by 5, Joel Embiid hit the mid-range, Jimmy. Curry hit it for 3. That's a common theme for this team. The fact that when it's down the stretch, they're executing, they're scoring. Now, they didn't execute the last play, but they are constantly executing in the fourth, and they've won, let's say, of all these situations, they've won the last 5 out of 6 times that was in play. You're not going to bat 1,000. So it's unfortunate, but a common theme is late down the stretch, they find ways to win, and sometimes it won't bounce your way.
Absolutely, bros. You're nailing it. They've been a great fourth quarter team all year. Coming into the game, I think they were 11-1 in games in which it was less a 5-point difference and under 2 minutes to go. They were 11-1 in those situations. Now they're 11-2, which is still the best record in the NBA for any team. I don't know what the numbers are now, but coming into the game last night, they had the best net rating in the NBA in the fourth quarter. Defensive rating was ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, listen, it's one game. And I think that's the way you got to look at it. They just played a tough game 2 nights ago against a really good Sacramento team that had been really hot, and they won that game in the fourth quarter. Portland just, they executed better down the stretch. It's one game. I think you got to keep that in perspective. For the most part, they've been excellent in the fourth quarter. They did an excellent job on Damian Lillard in the second half, especially Ben Simmons. So, I mean, yeah, I think there are a lot of positives to take away from that game last night. The bottom line is they didn't execute down the stretch, and the bench didn't give them enough.
Paul, when you mentioned about the bench, I got to figure out, we saw some good things from Thibault, right? We saw some good things from him in the game, but I felt like outside of Thibault and Howard, like you mentioned, the bench didn't do a lot last night. Now, of course, it helped that Carmelo Anthony had, 24 points last night off Portland's bench, but does that only emphasize what Broads and I talked about earlier? The fact is, there were problems with the Sixers team before last night's game, and I think that one of those things has to be the bench depth, right?
Absolutely. It's funny because the 2 losses to Portland have shown the value of 2 players. The first one was that we showed the value of Ben Simmons in a big way. And this one, it shows you the value of Shake Milton. I mean, the Sixers couldn't even run their offense, and Doc Rivers talked about that. They had 1 assist and 3 turnovers combined off the bench. They were like 7 of 20, I think, from the field combined. I mean, they just couldn't. Tyrese Maxey was in a tough spot. I mean, his play has been his playing time has been sporadic recently. He's a 20-year-old rookie that you're kind of throwing into that spot. It's not to make an excuse. It's just the reality of the situation. And Shake Milton had been playing pretty well. He was excellent in that Sacramento game down the stretch. Would have closed it out if he hadn't hurt his ankle. So, yeah, I think it demonstrates the value of Shake Milton. But then to your greater point, Josh, yes, it demonstrates that I think they need more off the bench. I think you look at how great Matisse Thybulle has been defensively, and then you play him with Dwight Howard. It's just not a good combination offensively. Then you have to play Maxey on top of it. And, his outside shot hasn't quite come around like maybe the Sixers would have hoped. So you're having three players on the court that are giving you nothing on the perimeter and really not much offensively in general. So, yeah, that hurts. So I think to me, it shows to me the biggest things the Sixers, the things this team needs: a stretch backup big and a shot creator. I still think they are those two things short. Now, I don't think they need to go out and get the best stretch big or the best shot creator, but they need to upgrade. And I think those are moves they can make. There are guys that are going to be available, guys that may already be available that fit that type of description. But I think, yeah, last night's game certainly emphasized the need for those two positions.
Yeah, I've questioned Shake's value to this point, and yesterday showed me a little something. I still think you need an upgrade, but just in terms of calming things down, he was someone that, you could rely on to do that off the bench to a degree. But you mentioned Ben Simmons, and I want one word from you to describe Ben Simmons' play last night, because I thought that was just magnificent. That's the Ben Simmons that before this season, and I would support him till no other, that's the Ben Simmons I saw last night.
Yeah, in one word, outstanding. He was, he was everywhere last night, both ends of the floor. He's really found something in the post with that little right-handed hook shot. It just seems like something that he's really comfortable going to. Seems to have better touch with it around the rim than some other shots that he shoots. So that's been one big thing. He certainly saw something with Covington he could exploit, and he did that. I love the aggressiveness, getting to the rim, the ferocity in which he's, finishing at the rim and getting in people's faces and getting a little angry. That I love. That kind of edge, I think, is only going to help him going forward. And then, and obviously setting up the offense. We talk about how the bench couldn't get into the offense. He was, great setting up the offense and had 9 assists last night. Would have had more if they had hit a few more threes. 1 assist away from a triple-double. And what I'm going to say till I'm blue in the face to you guys, 1 turnover. When he doesn't turn the basketball over, their offense is so much better. And last night was a big sign of that because their offense wasn't really the issue, especially with the starting unit. And then defensively, the job he did on Damian Lillard, I mean, my goodness. Dame didn't hit a 3 in the second half. He was 0 of 6. And I think he was 2 of 13 from the field in the second half. Ben Simmons told us last night he thinks he's the best defender in the NBA. And that's brash, but I'm not sure he's wrong. He might be the best defender in the NBA. So, and then, the greater picture, when you're looking at the ingredients the Sixers have to be good, you have an MVP candidate, you have a defensive player of the year candidate, and you might have 3 all-stars, and you're a really good defensive and fourth quarter team. That's a lot of good ingredients, and Ben Simmons is a huge part of that.
Paul Hudrick joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow Twitter at Paul Hudrick. On Twitter, check out all of his work at 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget his podcast, Coming In for a Landing. Paul, you mentioned about the All-Stars. I talked about it with Kevin McCormick last night on game night. I think that who I think should be an All-Star. But I'm starting to wonder if we're actually going to get all 3 of those guys as All-Stars because, first of all, I'm watching the voting go down from the fans. I don't know what basketball the fans are watching. The fact that Tobias isn't in the top 10 anymore, the fact that Domantas Sabonis is as low as he is in the voting, and the fact that Embiid isn't far away the number 1 big man, the front court guy in the voting, tells me there might be a possibility that between the fans, the coaches, and the media, and then the coaches selecting these guys, you may, in reality, have 3 All-Stars, but you might only end up with 1 or 2 because of how wonky this year is in general.
Yeah, I mean, fan voting's always it's tough. It's a popularity contest. I mean, really. I mean, like
Zaza
you said,
Pachulia, remember that?
What's that?
Zaza Pachulia, remember that?
Exactly. Like if Alex Caruso, I think, is in the West voting.
He's
because
top
Lakers
10,
fans
Paul.
love him.
He's top 10 right now.
That's just it is. It's all a popularity. That's why Derrick Rose is in there. That's why Russell Westbrook is in there. It's all a popularity contest. If it was just based off of guys playing basketball, obviously Joel Embiid would be leading all front court players. And honestly, Jokic would probably be leading front court players for that matter out west because of the year he's having. So, I mean, you're always going to have to battle that. Simmons has had to battle it the last 2 years because of the coaches and the players he's gotten in. But the fans haven't really done him any favors the last 2 seasons, and they're clearly not going to do it for Tobias Harris. So, yeah, the reality is, Embiid's most likely a lock, but Simmons and Harris, yeah, it's going to be tough. They're going to have to really pick up steam with the players and with the coaches. Ben Simmons, it's funny because I think Ben Simmons still has a better chance because of reputation around the league. Tobias Harris, he's having a great year, but obviously his reputation has taken a hit the last couple of years. Who knows? I mean, there's still some time here. Maybe the fans can get in and really give those guys a boost. But yeah, the reality is they might only have one guy. I mean, I think they should at least have 2, if not 3, especially when you factor in they are the best team in the Eastern Conference. That should matter. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, the fans are not doing Ben Simmons or Tobias Harris any favors right now.
Did you think that Doc Rivers was a little snippy last night in the postgame? I heard his remarks about switching Ben to Melo, and he was like, whoa, I mean, did you see Damian Lillard? And then he was asked about the usage of timeouts, and he started off answering with, well, you guys all forget that you wouldn't have the last play if that wasn't the case, because they wanted to challenge that Tobias foul, which I thought was a foul, to be honest with you. But I don't know, maybe it just shows that last play was eating him alive a bit. He just seemed snippy. Something was bothering him.
He was a little short last night, but I mean, to defend him a little bit, I mean, there's no way you were going to take Ben Simmons off Damian Lillard. Why would you do that? I mean, that's quite frankly, if I'm just looking at it, of course, why would you do, Damian Lillard is one of the best scorers in the NBA. Some would argue maybe the best scorer in the NBA. So why would you not have your best defender on him? You have to trust the rest of your team to defend Carmelo, a 36-year-old Carmelo Anthony who got hot for a few minutes and get credit to him. But I can live with that. I can live with Carmelo Anthony beating me. If he's going to hit open shots, great. But I'm not going to let Damian Lillard, who I know is great. I'm going to do everything I can to stop him. And then because I agree with you, bros, that it was a foul. I mean, to play with Tobias Harris, that was a foul. And if you use the review at that point and you don't have that last time out, then you can't even run that last play. Granted, it was a disastrous last play, but you don't even have a chance to run a disastrous play if you challenge that play and lose it. So I think it might have part of it. And listen, I don't want to take away from my media colleagues. Everyone does a great job, but I think just those questions, I think maybe, he really thought that those were, they were easy answers, basically, I guess you would say. But yeah, of course, he was frustrated. He lost. So yeah, a little bit short, perhaps shorter than normal, I would say, than maybe if they had won the game.
So now that they're playing the Suns Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m., folks can hear the game here on 97.3 ESPN. What can they take from the Portland game into the Suns game? Because the Suns, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, some phenomenal athletes. The Suns are no pushover.
No, Suns are a very good basketball team. And I think the biggest thing is, the way they defended Lillard, they're going to have to do a lot of the same things against Devin Booker. And listen, they still, like you said, they still have Chris Paul, so that they are a little bit more dangerous in that regard. But, I think Danny Green is a guy who I think can kind of match wits with Chris Paul a little bit, an experienced guy. So I think it's a pretty decent matchup for the Sixers. I think they can match up against them pretty well, but yeah, they're still great. I mean, Devin Booker, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. I think he's outstanding, and Chris Paul just keeps doing it. He's unbelievable at his age to still be playing at the level he's playing at. So yeah, and then former Sixer, quote unquote, Mikal Bridges is also having a hell of a year and playing really good basketball. So yeah, they are a very good team. They have some very good weapons. I think Dario Saric, I just saw, is going to be questionable or perhaps out against the Sixers. But yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup. I would say that they need to carry their game plan against Damian Lillard. They need to do something similar with Devin Booker because he can hurt them in a lot of the same ways. But it's going to be a tough matchup. And this road trip is no joke. You had Sacramento to start off, who was red hot. You have Dame Lillard in Portland. Then you're going to take on a Suns team, and then you have to play Utah, who is the hottest team in the NBA right now. So if they come out of this road trip 2-2. That's a win, because this is a really difficult trip. And like I said, it does not get any easier having to go up against Phoenix on Saturday.
Paul Hudrick joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Paul, one of your latest articles at 97.3ESPN.com, you, Jay Blevins, and Kevin McCormick wrote that breakdown of different trade candidates. So now that we're a couple days removed from the article that you guys wrote, have any of those trade candidates that you guys laid out, I believe it was 9 names altogether in that piece. Are there any new names? Are there any names taking off the list? You know, because obviously on Friday, this thing is ever evolving. You know, the NBA season's a weird amoeba of stuff going on right now. So is there anything different in the trade front for the Sixers right now?
Well, the guy we probably should have included that we didn't was Nemanja Bjelica from the Kings, who, of course, almost signed with the Sixers. He would be an ideal target. Listen, he's out of the Kings rotation right now, but he can shoot the heck out of the ball. He can give you some stretch 5 minutes, some stretch 4 minutes. I can't imagine the price would be all that much. So if you can maybe swindle him from the Kings, that would be an interesting pickup. There are reports that they are interested in him. And then I saw another report from The Athletic that the teams that are open for business are, I believe it was the Cavs, the Pistons, and the Thunder. And look, there are guys on those teams that I would have interest in. Maybe not the Cavaliers, but you look at the Pistons. DeLon Wright is a guy who scorched the Sixers a few weeks ago, who can, creates off the dribble for himself and for others, doesn't turn the ball over, would be an excellent fit off the bench here. Wayne Ellington, a Philly guy who is shooting the lights out right now. Sure, I take him off the bench as another option, as a guy who could just, hit threes. He's hitting, I think he's over like 45% this year from three. And then you look at the Thunder. George Hill is a guy I've had my eye on for the Sixers for a while. Another guy that can just add some stability at that backup point guard spot. Can't imagine, again, it would take a ton to get him. And then a role for him, Mike Muscala, another guy who fits that like stretch big role. Sure, I would take a flyer on him as a low cost kind of guy. So I think those are the names you're already seeing out there. I think there's going to be more names out there as more teams kind of start to fall out of this thing and start to realize, hey, we're probably better off selling than we are competing for a play-in playoff spot. So like you said, Josh, it's going to be ever evolving. There's going to be more names coming out. So, and I think Daryl Morey's going to take his time, because listen, they're still the number 1 seed in the East right now. They're still playing really good basketball. So he's not going to be in a hurry. We still got over a month until the trade deadline. So there's going to be more stuff evolving, more names added to that list as we go on.
Real quick, who makes the trade first, Daryl Morey or Howie Roseman?
I would imagine Howie Roseman at this point, but you never know with Daryl Morey, man. Can never count that guy out.
Well, just wondering, because I know you really quick, for anybody watching on the video feed, so you and McCormick both have Philly stuff in your background, and you're both Sixers guys. So I just want to point that out, because I don't know if you've seen McCormick's background, but he's got 3 Phillies jerseys just casually hanging on the wall in his background. And you have a Phillies hat over, you both have it over what would be your right shoulders, but is our left. So I don't know if there's like simpatico going on here, but good for you guys for having some diversity.
Hey, man, listen, I cover the Sixers, but I'm a fan of the other teams. That's the way I look at it.
Nice. Bros appreciates that.
Of course. I just scream about all 4 of them. So it doesn't matter. That's what I do. I scream.
Paul Hudrick, follow him on Twitter at Paul Hudrick. Check out all of his work at 97.3ESPN.com. And don't forget the Coming In for a Landing podcast. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Paul, appreciate the time, man.
You got it. Have a great weekend, guys.
609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, we'll get to your comments on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter watching the show. Really quick, a couple people said Stephen A. Smith screaming at Howie for the 30 for 30. Another person says Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men narrating the 30 for 30.
The Stephen A. Smith one, I'm afraid would get to, like, if he's his shtick, like the Stephen A., like his personality on First Take, I don't know if that's exactly what I'm looking for. That would be funny. Don't get me wrong. That would be highly entertaining from like a comedy standpoint, I feel. But I want real intimidation. I don't think Stephen A. would give off that like intimidating vibe. It would be like a blasphemy kind of thing where it's funny, but it's not the real intimidation, the rawness that I'm looking for. Yeah. I'm talking about putting a rag on his mouth and pouring water down his throat.
Oh, you mean waterboarding?
Yes.
Yeah. We got Billy Dog with the laughing emojis over there on YouTube about that.
Yeah, it's a little aggressive. Don't get me wrong. I think that it's maybe crossing the line a little bit, but maybe not, because this is the downfall that we can't support. So let's put our foot down. Let's put our feet down, I guess I should say.
Two very different comments here on YouTube. Let's start with Jeff Bone and Pookie over here. He says, do you think we can get a first-round pick if we trade Wentz and Ertz?
Well, I think it goes back to, if Wentz isn't worth a first-rounder, what is Ertz's value? And I'm not saying it's worth a first-rounder. I'm just saying in general. What is Ertz's value solo? Because I think that matters, so we can kind of find a common ground here of what they are worth together. What is Ertz separate?
No more than a second-round pick.
Yeah, I think you'd be lucky to get a second-round pick, knowing that the
third.
Contract. So if it's a third, if you package those two together, let's say it's 2 seconds and 2/3. Is that a realistic possibility for those two together?
Well, if you combine them, if Wentz is, let's say, a high first-round pick and Ertz is a high third-round pick, then is the two of them together worth a mid-round first-round pick or a late first-round pick?
I guess you can do it that way. So instead of the two, but a team might not be willing to do that.
I don't have the Dallas Cowboys breakdown of the aquatics in front of me of when Jimmy Johnson made the Herschel Walker trade, but I'm just kind of guesstimating here.
Yeah, I don't. Man, if you told me you got rid of Ertz and Wentz together and got 2 second-rounders and 2/3, that'd be pretty damn disappointing. It would be.
We also got Frank commenting on the YouTube channel. Says, I would take 2 2s and a third for Carson. I don't think we can get a 1. So take that offer and draft well with it.
You might be able to I think the ceiling, if you look at this, the top of the top that you could maybe squeeze out is a first, but I do think it's going to be hard. It's definitely not going to be easy, especially if the two teams in play already kind of have their offers out there. And you mentioned Denver maybe being in the mix. I don't think there's that much of a threat to the Bears and the Colts other than themselves. There might be an outside reach, but really I don't think they see it as there's another threat going to swoop in and outbid either one of those two teams.
609-403-0973 is expert. Also, you can comment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter while you watch the show at 973 ESPN. Josh Hennig, Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. I just want to scroll up to a comment a little bit earlier that we didn't get to. Just got to remember. Oh, here it is. So this comment brought in earlier by Joe Rivera on the YouTube channel. It says, Howie wants to get rid of Wentz's contract if he can get decent competition, but Goff and Wentz traded in the same offseason. Wow. I think that's what is underplayed a lot. Like, the two top quarterbacks of a draft are both going to be no longer with their original teams within 5-6 years of their draft. I mean, that's unheard of.
It definitely is. And I'm not going to say I'm in the minority with this, but the Jared Goff situation, like, I don't think he's as bad as maybe the Rams made him seem. Now, you get Matthew Stafford and you give up picks for it. And also, obviously, I think Matthew Stafford's a better quarterback than Jared Goff, but I do think that he a little bit disrespected with how people view him. I do feel like there is this narrative behind him that he stinks, he's only this, he's only that. I mean, going to Detroit, it's a hard place to really succeed in, so I don't know if that's fair, but I do think the conversation that he's not a good quarterback is, like, he got to the Super Bowl. I don't think that it's just all Sean McVay on why you got to the Super Bowl.
So my opinion is that I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just don't think he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
No, he's not in that top
tier. He's
tier.
not going to win a Super Bowl for you. The part of the problem with Goff is that he had McVay telling him in his ear what to do most of the time.
But isn't that majority of I would say 90%, 85% of quarterbacks in this league probably need that assistance.
I think that'd be a little high. If it's that high, then we got a real problem.
What's a fair number, you think? 75?
70.
Okay.
If we're including every quarterback in the league.
Okay. That's still a good chunk, though.
But the problem is that Goff was never evolving to get better, though. Like, he never got the training wheels off the bike. You know what I mean?
But is that his fault?
I don't know. Is that his fault? Is that Sean McVay's fault? Like, when I watched Hard Knocks this year, McVay is literally telling him what to do, and he goes out and executes it perfectly. It's like, all right, the guy's a good listener. He's good at executing what you tell him to do. But as soon as the game gets off tracks, he has trouble adjusting. But like you asked, I don't know, is that the Rams' fault for never taking the training wheels off? Is that Goff's fault for maybe never saying take the training wheels off? I don't know. We're going to find out pretty soon with the Lions.
I just don't. Yeah, but once again, that's a hard place to really succeid in, especially with this whole new environment there.
Oh, come on, they're going to bite kneecaps off and do Staley's there now.
Oh, yeah, of course. How could I forget? I just, I don't know. I would tend to lean more towards it's the organization's fault if you're going to baby him the whole time. But I also don't think that's a big deal. If your head coach is telling you what to do and that brings you to a Super Bowl, and they lost to Tom Brady, and it was ugly offensively, there's no denying it. But if that's good enough to get you to the Super Bowl, there's something there. There's something to it. You know what I mean, though? It's not an epic fail if you got to tell them what to do, but it gets you to a Super Bowl. You're not that far off.
Well, that's why they said we'll take Stafford.
And I don't blame
Stafford's
them.
Upgrade.
I don't blame them for Stafford. It is an upgrade. I just also think the narrative behind Goff is a little extreme as well, of like he's not good all of a sudden.
Oh, it certainly is extreme. I will give you that. He's Hunter Brody, by the way. I'm Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN, filling in for Mike Gill on a TGIF Friday. Still to come, Football and Forward, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast with Adam Caplan. Coming up next, welterweight champion of the world, UFC champ Kamaru Usman joins us here on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Caplan.
I have real confidence that our football operations can once again create a dominant football team.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football and Forward, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Drops every week, Monday and Thursday mornings. And, of course, Adam Caplan joins us every Friday here on 97.3 ESPN to get more into what's going on with the Eagles. Because, you know, Broads, the Eagles, they never really seem to stop anything. The cycle doesn't stop, the news doesn't stop, and that's pretty good for the guys at the Inside the Birds to keep busy.
Absolutely. They're the best in the business.
Well, I mean, I listen to them every time, but, you know.
So do I.
What do I know?
Yeah.
Adam, how you doing today?
Guys, good to talk to you here on this Friday. And we'll see what happens with Carson Wentz. I know we'll get into that. We had the Trevor Lawrence workout today for NFL teams. Spoke to a couple teams that were there. Went as well as you would think it would be. Not that the Eagles could draft him. But, look, it's lots going on. The Eagles actually finalized a coaching staff over the last 24 hours. There have been a couple surprises. One that was very bizarre today, which we can get into. And we got notes on the offense, the defensive schemes, which are going to change a little bit. So lots going on.
So let's start at the top with the thing that nobody can stop talking about, Carson Wentz. It's getting to the point where you have a group of people who they're just so impatient. They're like, we were told this is coming in days, right?
Yeah.
And another group of people who are like, we're trying to wait for the best deal, guys. So what is the latest on the 2016 second overall pick?
Look, let me put it to you this way. As we speak, it could go down. It could go down in 10 minutes. It could go down in 10 days. The Eagles are going to move Carson Wentz, barring a extremely unforeseen surprise. Why do I put it into that term and phrase? He's wanted to be moved for really not weeks, months, but it's not like he could be traded or even talk about being traded for a season. He's just not happy with the organization. It wasn't just Doug Peterson. That was wrong when people said, oh, that'll placate him. He had issues with not just the head coach, the former head coach, with he just didn't feel what I would call, as one source said, organizational support, and he wants out. The Eagles are trying to do right by him, despite the cap hit, which will be over $33 million once they move him. But the fact of the matter is, he's going to be moved, again, barring a surprise. I still believe it's going to be the Colts. I've said that from day one. I still think that's the number one team, and not just me saying that. Multiple NFL teams I've spoken with who are looking for a quarterback feel that way, but I'm not the one who's involved in it, so we'll see what happens. But that's kind of where it is. And by the way, the one thing on the timeline, guys, the first deadline, if you want to call it that, it's a loose deadline. There's really no real deadline to do this. But to save some money here, not only the cap, but in cash, they owe him $10 million on a fully guaranteed roster bonus on March 19th. So that's really the first date that they're going to want to have him move, which is the third day of free agency.
What's the plan after he gets moved?
Yeah, Hunter, that's what I think that's really what we should be looking at and fans should be talking about. Is it going to be Jalen Hurts? Well, obviously he would be the starter as of right now once Wentz is moved. But they're going to have, once they trade Wentz, they'll have to add two quarterbacks. You can't have a training camp with two quarterbacks. You can't do that. So you'll have 3 quarterbacks. So it'll be Hurts. They may draft a quarterback, and I expect them to add a veteran. We'll see who that could be. But when you look at it right now, Jalen Hurts, the second-round pick last year, which certainly was surprising. Boy, to this day, I still can't believe it. But they took him. Who knew, folks? Who knew that there would become a day that he actually could be the Eagles' starting quarterback? But as I understand it, that would be the early plan. Things could always change. But that would be the early plan, to go forward with Hurts and add other quarterbacks later.
Just to add some clarity to what you said about the veteran quarterback, are we talking about maybe like a name like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, or are we talking about maybe like a lesser guy would the Eagles be interested in?
Well, no, what they would look for is someone who's at least started games before. Last year, I'd reported that the Eagles were going to sign Joe Flacco. That was the guy that they targeted. But Joe wound up needing neck surgery, so they backed off. And, obviously they went into a different direction. As a matter of fact, they went a completely different direction. They drafted Jalen Hurts, which is certainly surprising. I didn't see that coming. But look, by the way, Flacco is an unrestricted free agent. There's some veterans out there. Let's put it this way. I don't know that they would bring in someone that would come in and challenge them to start, but I was talking to my friend Kevin Nagani from ESPN a couple of days ago. He said that Chris Mortensen went on the 6 o'clock Sports Center and mentioned that the Eagles might have some interest in Marcus Mariota. Now, Mariota is available, as I understand it. He's got a salary cap number less than $10 million. So that one would make sense. I understand Chip Kelly wanted him 15, but that was Chip Kelly wanting him. That had nothing to do with Howie Roseman at that time. But they would look, I believe, as I understand, to bring in a veteran. It doesn't have to be someone who's going to make a lot of money. It's just that they like to have someone experienced to either play alongside or back up Jalen Hurts, who could potentially challenge him, but it's not going to be like a super high-priced quarterback at $20 million. It's not happening.
Real quick with the timeline, you mentioned the soft date, if you will, with the $10 million. Yeah. What would be after that? Is there another soft date after the start of the new year?
Yeah, Hunter, as I look at his contract, we're talking about Carson Wentz here. There's a lot of guaranteed money left. There's an advance guarantee. If he's on the contract on the third day of the league year, I'll open that up in just a second here. Here it is. So in what I have, his base salary of $22 million becomes fully guaranteed on the third day of free agency this year. It's called an advance guarantee. So that would also be the date. But in terms of this year's money, it's $10 million now, and then $22 million gets guaranteed next year. So they're going to want to move him by the third day of the league year. Does it absolutely have to be that? And then no, just as long as they think they're still going to be able to trade him by the draft, because if they decide later on they want to draft somebody fairly early on, I don't think it would be in the first round, but if they want to draft someone in the second or third round, you want to have Wentz off the roster by then.
Adam Caplan joining us, Football on 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Adam on Twitter at Caplan NFL for your Eagles and NFL insights. Inside the Birds podcast drops Monday and Thursday mornings, all off season long. Caplan and Mosher joins us at Football on 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. Adam, let's get into the coaching staff. They have made the official announcement of the coaching staff, but one of the things that stands out to a lot of people is no senior offensive or defensive assistant coaches. Any specific reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I'm surprised. We had reported that, at least I know this for a fact, they were looking into one on offense and defense. For whatever reason, now it's not like there's no rule that says you can't add a coach later. That you can do that. There's no rule that says you can't do that. There's no salary cap on coaches, by the way. But for now, they're not going to add one. I know for a fact that head coach Nick Sirianni considered one or two, or actually three former head coaches for the National Football League, but to this date, he has not added them. So right now, they're not on the roster. So that's where that is. Now, here's the other. This is interesting. Now, Mosher and I hinted on our show Inside the Birds about 3 weeks ago that we were hearing there'd be very few, if no, assistant position coaches. Well, they only had one, and the one left the team today. His name is Jay Valai. According to ESPN.com, one of the college writers, I think it's Adam Rittenberg, reported that He's leaving the Eagles. Okay, he's leaving the Eagles and go to Alabama. It's like, how do you turn down an Alabama job? But if you're following me on Twitter at Caplan NFL, I noted that he's had 6 jobs, different jobs now in 3 years. He was with the University of Texas. Then last season, over a season actually at Texas. For that Rutgers, then he accepted a job at University of Houston. Left there, was only there a month. He actually never coached for them. He was just there in January. Just joined the Eagles less than 3 weeks ago, and now he's going to Alabama. So right now they don't have one assistant position coach for the first time in I don't know how long, certainly at least 6 years. And the reason we were told that that Sirianni didn't want them is because he wants to streamline the staff. He wants the guys who are actually coaching the position, just to be those coaches. Not that Shane Steichen won't be somewhat coaching Jalen Hurts and whoever the other quarterbacks are going to be, but it's going to be specific to that position and that guy's responsibility. They're not going to add much. The only guy who's staying as an assistant position coach would be with Jeff Stoutland is the guy that was there last season, but they didn't add any new ones that are there now. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And it's just to see, Roy Istvan, who was there the last couple seasons, that Jeff, I'm told, brought him in, but they did not add any new position coaches in terms of assistants. And
speaking of Nick Sirianni, has there been any offensive scheme philosophy changes?
Yeah, so Hunter, and now it's a little early here, so let's not go crazy with this stuff. But when I talked to some coaches who work with Sirianni and know the way he thinks, and he said you could expect that the route combinations will not be as deep. It's not like they're not going to have 9 routes. They're going to have 9 routes, which are deeper passes. But what you're going to have is you're not going to have so many vertical routes. They're going to have a lot of shallow crosses, in breaking routes, not as many deeper passes. So that's good news because Moshe and I think it's true because we talked to other teams that criticized Eagles coaches last season in terms of scheme. The philosophy of just so many deeper routes. Yeah, we know they had better speed last season. There's no doubt about it. But you're not going to see as many deeper routes. And that on offense is something that needed to change. And I'm glad they're doing that because they became very predictable last season.
You mentioned about the types of routes. It sounds like from what you're describing, this sounds like almost like a blend of what the Colts and Chargers did. So it almost seems like Sirianni's bringing some of what he had with Reich in Indianapolis, some of what Steichen had with the Chargers. Is that a right interpretation?
Yeah, Josh, I would say that it was definitely going to be more of a West Coast scheme in terms of philosophy and look. This is what a couple coaches told me that worked with Nick before, and that's the way they think that he thinks about this offense. It's not going to be as stretch the field base. Again, it's not like they're not going to throw the ball deep. Of course they will. Every team does that. And then the other thing is with protection, you hope with Lane Johnson, we reported a couple weeks ago that we'd heard his ankle surgery is doing his rehab is going really well. And I'm told that he's told people that he feels like it's going to be like good as new. So that's good. And they've really got to rebuild this offensive line in terms of getting younger. I know that Brandon Brooks, they owe him $10 million fully guaranteed this season. So you would expect him to be back. We don't know about Jason Kelsey. He's on the final year of his deal. It's that option year. So the Eagles have to make a decision on his contract. And I know the Eagles are going to look at after they get the Wentz deal done, assume it gets done soon, they'll make a decision on Kelsey. And look, some older players, they've got to make decisions on Rodney McLeod on defense, who's on the final year of his deal. Some older players they have to they kind of look at and see what they want to do. And this is kind of the deal here, guys. This is going to be a semi-rebuild. The Eagles would never say that publicly, but I know people who are familiar with Eagles thinking know that it's going to be somewhat of a rebuild.
Since you brought up the offensive line, I think one of the most intriguing fights for a position, if you will, this offseason is going to be Mailata and Dillard. Do you think that it's Mailata's job to lose? Dillard, where does that sit, do you think?
Okay, so, Hunter, Jordan Mailata, if the season started today, and this is just my thinking, will be the left tackle. Andre Dillard's under contract. We know he's coming off of a significant injury. As far as I'm concerned, he'll be there. I don't know that they're not making him available to be traded right now, and I don't know that they would trade him. But assuming he's on the roster, I'm fully expecting Mailata to beat him out. He did such a good job, and he's so far advanced. He stayed healthy. And by the way, He finished the season healthy, I'm told. His back is fine. There are no issues. So he is back. He'll compete for that left tackle job against Dillard. I expect him to win it. Isaac Seumalo is a really solid starting left guard. They don't know who their center is going to be yet. Brandon Brooks, this is the last year of that fully guaranteed money. And Lane Johnson, he's got a contract that's untradeable. He'll be back. Not that they want to trade him. He's back at right tackle, but he's 30. So here's the problem. You got 3 guys, if Kelsey's back, who are over 30 years old. That's not a good thing. You got to get younger. And I expect the Eagles to address the youth on the offensive line in the draft.
Adam, let's jump over to the defensive side. What are some of the changes and expectations that you expect to see from the Eagles defense now with Mr. Gannon here?
Yeah, so Josh, we're going to talk about that Inside the Birds the next 2 weeks. We're doing positional previews, by the way. We did quarterback. We just did running back. Our next show, which will drop on 6 a.m. if you're watching us on the stream or watching the replay, we're going to drop the next show because we're on twice a week now, Mondays and Thursdays at 6 a.m. Eastern. The next show will be the wide receiver positional preview. We'll get to the defense probably in the following week, but I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It'd still be a 43, but some of these coaches I spoke with think they're still going to run that wide 9, probably not going to be very involved. Under Gannon, it's going to be much more of the Minnesota base because that's his background, the way he's some in Indianapolis. His major background in his career is with Mike Zimmer in terms of thinking. And that's more of a 43, non-wide 9. It's more, I don't want to call it bend and don't break front, but it's more read and react. It's more of a secondary-based defense. And it's a lot of it's a lot of disguise. You're going to see post-snap disguise. That's what these coaches who work with Gannon believe in the past. I need to get more clarification on it, but that's the early word I got. So you know what? That's the thing that we've complained about with Jim Schwartz, guys. Lack of post-snap disguise. He made it very easy for the opponent to figure out. So there are going to be some significant philosophy changes on both sides of the football this season.
Do you anticipate that resulting in maybe more turnovers from the secondary? Because a lot of that last year was not even last year.
I know. You won't see 0 interceptions by the secondary. You're going to see some forced by the safeties and the corners. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's a great question, a great point. You're going to see that. Look, it's the infancy of Mosher not getting information. I haven't really talked to the Eagles much about it yet, but I do know from talking to coaches at work with these guys over the years and whatever stops they were, this is what's likely to happen in terms of philosophy. But we need to learn more. And remember, they'll address a little bit in the free agency. They're not going to be heavily involved in free agency for obvious reasons because of the cap issue. I'd like to see them get younger in the back end, particularly at corner, opposite Darius Slay, which they know they have to do. And they'll do that. Look, they have a lot of needs. This is probably the most needs they've needed on both sides of the football in recent years, and it's going to be good to see. I hope they look. The belief internally is with compensatory picks, they could have up to 10 draft picks if they don't trade any away, and they're going to need any picks they can get. And who knows, maybe they'll trade away a couple of veterans for some picks.
Now you mentioned the draft, Adam, with these philosophy changes, with the new coaches, with the new expectations for this offseason, how does that impact the draft as well? Because you and Mosher have talked about in the past about how this is the team's philosophy about, let's say, linebackers or about cornerbacks. So now a new coach, new scheme, how does that affect what they do with the draft?
You know, I got to talk about linebacker right now. That's actually, I'm looking into that because I'm talking to guys who have worked with the Vikings before. And see, it's funny. Even going back to the late Jim Johnson, he liked his linebacker smaller and faster. And they still have held true even through Jim Schwartz. I do wonder, Josh, will that change under Jonathan Gannon, who's a defensive back guy? I do really wonder if because Alex Singleton was tremendous. He had a breakout season, but they don't really have TJ Edwards is just a downhill first and second down linebacker. So I do really wonder, and Nate Gary, by the way, his contract's up. I do wonder if they're going to bring in bigger linebackers. Like, Anthony Barr is a bigger linebacker. He could rush. He's not coming here. He's under contract with the Vikings, but I'm giving you an example. He's a longer, bigger linebacker. I do really wonder, will their philosophy change on size at the linebacker position?
Since we are discussing defense, I know this isn't Eagles, but I want to hear your thoughts on the J.J. Watt situation. When that dropped today, I was stunned.
Yeah, I mean, he turns 32 on March 22nd. He's older. He didn't want to be there because he doesn't want to continue to be on a losing team. And it's just not a secret. He was not happy with the culture last season. So I expect him once it's official, they announced it, but they haven't turned the transaction. And once it's official, I expect him to go to a team that can win. I think he's not going anywhere in a rebuild. And I expect him to go to a team where he could go in and win right away and have a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, the one organization that's more of a dumpster fire are Broads and the Eagles. Even though Eagle fans will tell you the Eagles are a mess, the Texans are much worse, right, Adam?
Oh, yeah. God, yeah. Oh, yeah. They're way bad.
He's Adam Caplan, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Follow Adam on Twitter at Caplan NFL. Inside the Birds, next episode drops Monday morning, 6 a.m. Mosher and Caplan. Download it, subscribe, rate and review, etc. All. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Adam, great stuff today.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Football at 4 being brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelyle.back.com or call them at 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Yeah, one organization. Despite what Eagle fans think, Texans, nobody wants to be there. In fact, I retweeted this earlier. Jeff Darlington listed all the people who have left. Either they've been fired, traded, or they left on their own volition. And it's getting to the point where it's like, nobody wants to work with these people.
Do you think it's payback for the Houston Astros cheating their way to victory?
Well, it's funny you say that because someone also brought up late last night, about the fact that, everyone's leaving Houston. George Springer left in free agency. They trade away James Harden. That Deshaun Watson was outside. Then J.J. Watt leaves. I mean, they don't have a hockey team, so we can't go hockey. But, I mean, the other three sports, apparently there's an exodus going on in Houston.
Yeah, for real. And look, I was stunned when I saw the news. I'm not shocked because we know that he's unhappy and the state of the franchise. But still, when you see that he asked for the release and it actually happens and you saw Rappaport tweet it out there, there's still a sense of like, whoa, you know what I mean? Even though you know that he's not happy, when you see it, and then when he puts out that video explaining everything, it's just huge. It's just a huge thing to go down today. And wow, J.J. Watt out of town, huh?
I love the fact that the guy is so classy. He puts out a message to everybody saying, I wanted you to hear it from me first before the Texans did their whole circus act. Like, he's a part of us forever, blah, blah, blah. We didn't force him out. This was a mutual decision, blah, blah, blah. Let me vomit all over myself so it makes it look like I'm better, blah, blah, blah. I'm Cal McNair. I'm ruining the franchise.
I agree with you. I think it was great that he went out there. And it wasn't – I think you got a lot out of it, too, that it was a video. It wasn't words. Not that words wouldn't have been fine. Words would have been okay, but you just feel the connection differently when you hear his tone of voice, you see his body language, his facial expression.
He was very sincere in the video,
no doubt.
too.
No doubt about it.
There was no clowning around. This was a very serious thing for him. And I honestly feel for him because that guy gave his blood, sweat, tears, everything to that organization. And he saw him apologize to Deshaun Watson when they're walking off the field. This stuff means something to this guy. And I hope he goes somewhere and he wins the Super Bowl.
He's their version of Jason Kelce in terms of when he talks to you from the media standpoint, you know what you're getting. You're getting the legit how he feels. Like everything he says, he means. And he had that whole entire monologue about what it means to win and how much you got to put everything in there. And very similar to Jason Kelce.
You know where I hope he goes?
Tampa Bay.
No.
Because they're winning.
No.
What do you mean?
No.
If Tom Brady's there, they're winning.
No. I want him to go to the Colts so he can torment the Texans twice a year.
Wow. Carson and J.J. Watt.
I mean, they seem like two guys who might hang out.
I could see that. J.J. Watt, does he hunt?
Yeah.
Does he fish?
Yeah.
All right, he could probably hang.
He goes to Subway, too, apparently.
Oh, yes, that's right.
No, but seriously, I hope he goes in the division because I want him to torment that organization. Remember back in the day, well, not back in the day, it was like 12 years ago, when Brett Favre, he ended up going to the Vikings, and Packer fans were like, we got to see this guy twice a year. Like, oh, come on. But it was great entertainment value. Remember that?
Yeah, but I think the difference is Packers fans might have not have wanted to see that. I feel all the Houston Texans fans are like, JJ, please destroy us. You know what I mean? It's almost the opposite where they're, please crush us into the ground.
And guess what? The Colts have the cap space, too, to do it. So
you're not wrong there.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Again, Football at 4 Adam Caplan today. Jeff Mosher on Monday's show here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to IloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. 609-403-0973 is the text board, and you watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We will get to your comments as well. But I promised you, Broads, I got some players who I think will get a higher return on a trade than Carson Wentz. I want to know what you and the listeners think out there listening to us right here on the Sports Bash. Sound good?
Sounds great.
97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City, and we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just follow 97.3 ESPN. Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Alongside Brody here. We'll be getting your messages on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 609-403-0973 on the text board as well. Don't forget, happy hour of the PT coming up at 5 p.m. UFC Welterweight champion Kamaru Usman joins us at 5:20 tonight. Talk about UFC 258. But I got some names for you, bros. And a couple of our listeners who are watching on Facebook, YouTube, are talking about the same topic, which is the quarterbacks, right? So we've been talking about what is compensation for Wentz. I think that there is compensation that will get more for other players. And I want to know what you think of these players, because I think that we're so hyper-focused on Wentz that we forget that there's a bigger quarterback market going on. There could be 5 total quarterbacks traded between now and the beginning of the year.
I really only see one that gets a bigger package. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say. And I'm not against maybe being swayed. Maybe you see it a way that I haven't seen it yet, and that might change my perspective. But off the top of my head, before we begin, I see one. So I'm very intrigued by this.
So I think we both are talking about Deshaun Watson.
Yes, that would be the one.
So the next guy on my list is Matt Ryan. NFL MVP, award winner. He's probably got 2 really good years left in him at this point. And I can see a contender going out to get him, whether it's San Francisco or somebody else.
Huh. Would a team pay a first-round pick for Matt Ryan?
I think they would probably.
You do?
I think they probably would have to. Because I think the Falcons are non-committal to him. So we know he's available. I just don't know, is it the 49ers? Is it the Patriots, for goodness sake? You know, there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks.
I guess if you look at it as my team is completely built and we're a quarterback away, is it worth giving up a first-rounder for Matt Ryan? If that's the situation, I guess I could see a team overpaying for a Matt Ryan. Man, it's so crazy because if you think Carson Wentz...
it's not overpaying. It's paying more than what Carson Wentz would get you.
But to me, at least, and obviously this is all subjective, I think a first-round pick for Matt Ryan, where he is in his career right now, that would be a bit of an overpay. But if you're a quarterback away, I'd also be acknowledging that I'm okay with overpaying for a quarterback if that's what I need and I have all the other pieces surrounding me. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Now, I will note to you that Matt Ryan has led the NFL in total completions the last 2 years.
I think a lot of that has to do with because they're down and they play. You know what I mean? It's not as if the Falcons are in this spot where he's
I didn't realize this.
Dominating.
He has thrown for over 4,000 yards the last 10 straight years.
Yeah. He's
10 straight years.
Yeah, he's been throwing the rock around.
And in that stretch, can you guess the number of interceptions, which was the most he's thrown in a season?
Just last year, you mean?
No, in the last 10 years.
In the last 10 years?
The most interceptions he has thrown in a year.
Okay.
It's less than Wentz.
No, well, I mean, I honestly have no idea. I don't want to say something so bad that it makes it seem like,
Want to give you a range?
Yeah, sure. Give me a range.
Okay, so the least number of interceptions he's thrown in the last several years is 7. And he has thrown for 12 twice.
My guess was going to be 14. That was going to be my guess. So
you're not too far off. It's 17 in 2013. Last year he threw for 11 interceptions. He's also in the mid-60s in completion percentage almost every year.
I don't think it's outrageous to say that he might be able to get more than Wentz. I'll put him in that category of I could understand a team paying more than 2 second-rounders for Matt Ryan. It just has to be the right fit. I don't think that, all these teams are going to call them. If they're a team that's not constructed properly, you're not just going to go pick up Matt Ryan just to pick up Matt Ryan. So there's very limited that I think would pull the trigger higher than 2 seconds, but I do believe it's possible in theory.
The other quarterback I can see getting more compensation than Wentz. This is the controversial one. This one, when I throw it out there, you're not going to agree with me probably at all, based on how you answered the Matt Ryan one. Sam Darnold.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because Sam Darnold, he has less of a resume than Wentz. So he has less for you to actually go back and say, this yes, this no.
But none of it was special.
He had special games.
He had nice moments. Special is Carson Wentz special.
Are you sure, though?
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them were guys who, when they came out of college, they were both kind of considered the same player. Physical athlete, all the physical tools, good guy, leadership, intangibles. They both came from modest upbringings. They both didn't come from like big, time high schools or anything like that before they got to college and had success.
Do you think Sam Darnold's best, the best we've seen out of Sam Darnold, touches Carson Wentz's MVP season?
Yes.
You do.
And I say
I'm a little shocked by that.
And I say that because I think that Darnold's problem in New York that he was surrounded by garbage.
And that's fine. I think that that's fair for sure. But I also saw Carson Wentz. I don't know if I could see Sam Darnold bringing Greg Ward, Rob Davis, and those 4 or 5 practice squad guys on a 4-game winning streak to make the playoffs.
But see, I don't need him to do that.
Sure.
I need him to go to, for example, a team that needs a quarterback. The Bears, the Colts, let's say the 49ers get rid of Jimmy G. Let's say the Texans trade Deshaun Watson to the Jets for their first-round pick and Sam Darnold, right?
But isn't Sam Darnold now in a situation where he's surrounded by garbage once again? Not in terms of roster stuff, but more so organizational failure.
Yeah, the Texans would be an organizational failure, but I think the talent is better with Houston in terms of offensive weapons than the Jets right now. But I think the other teams I mentioned, they are all better situations than the Jets. I think we forget sometimes that your situation impacts you a lot. Part of it is you, part of it is your situation. Like, look at all the quarterbacks who end up having success later in their careers. Back in the day, it was Jim Plunkett. Look at Kurt Warner, for example. Matt Hasselbeck was just on the practice squad for years with the Packers before he got to the Seahawks and had a really nice career. I think Darnold has it in him to be what Wentz did if he goes to the right situation.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit. And now, what do you think is a fair, if Wentz's best offer, and I'm just going to keep going back to this because this is the only thing that we hear, and this is from Jaws, and apparently there's something better on the table, but we don't know what that is.
Right.
2 second-rounders and possibly a third and a fourth. If that's Wentz's value, what do you think Sam Darnold could go for?
A first-round pick.
You really think so?
Because he was drafted that high in the draft just a couple of years ago.
I don't think he's shown you enough for a first-round pick.
Maybe not, but I think that there's somebody out there who might overpay just to get him. That's why I'm thinking this way.
I can support your Matt Ryan one. I don't know if I can go down the road of the Sam Darnold. And I'm curious if people agree with me or if they're more on your pace, if you will.
Well, it's funny when you say that because Joey D. and Ventnor chimed in earlier in the show on Facebook and asked this question. If you had to choose one in this tier of quarterbacks, which would you pick regardless of their contract?
Well, I was just about to bring up Sam Darnold's contract and factor that into the equation. That matters, though. I know.
Well, Sam Darnold's got a pretty inexpensive contract compared to most of these guys on this list.
Which is going to play a factor in the compensation that you have to give up or whatever the case may be. So that does matter.
So he's got an interesting list here. If you can watch it on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, but we'll read it to you here on the radio on 97.3 ESPN FM. He's got Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo, Cam Newton, and Sam Darnold. So 7 guys. If you had to pick one quarterback out of that 7, I know what my answer is immediately. I don't have to think about this. I want to know what you think, bros.
I'm torn between Stafford and Ryan, and I'm going to go Stafford based off of how much time I think he has left.
I'm going Stafford.
Yeah.
To me, it's not a question.
But if Matt Ryan was 3 years younger, I think I would go Ryan.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
And here's why. Matthew Stafford is top 5 in the NFL in the last 10 years in fourth-quarter comebacks and game-winning drives. and he did that in Detroit. Like you talked about Wentz elevating practice squad guys. Stafford was elevating a garbage franchise. To me, that's a whole new level of elevation. And now you take him and you put him in a better situation. Give me Stafford because he's a gamer. He's a leader. Everyone who's ever played with this guy, everyone I've seen in television, heard in radio interviews, they love this guy. They play for this guy. This guy had a separated shoulder and said, put me back in the game. Like, he is everything you want in a quarterback to be your leader. To me, he has something that the other guys on that list don't have. Darnold's never done it. Newton's done it a few times, but I think Newton's past his prime. Jimmy G's never done it. Goff maybe did it once or twice. Matt Ryan's done it a few times. Wentz did it a few times. But Stafford did it more than any of them. He carried teams. And to me, that's why I elevate him above everyone on that list.
Oh, no doubt. And that's why I said, I'm torn between the two, but I lean Stafford for sure. But I do think if we're talking about a younger version of Matt Ryan, I think that is definitely more of a debate than it is right now. But in terms of Stafford, I'm there with you. Now, let's take those two out. And you have to pick one from the list without Matt Ryan, without Matthew Stafford.
So you're going Wentz, Goff, Garoppolo, Newton, Darnold.
Yeah, and I think I know my answer, which is kind of scaring me.
See, this one's hard for me to answer because you know me, I'm done with Wentz. And I think Goff is not progressed enough in his quarterback development. So I got to throw both of them out. I don't like my other three options, honestly. But if I could guarantee the situation was good, and I could guarantee that everything was, everything was lined up like the way you want it to be, like if it was, I don't know, like the Colts or the 49ers or Stafford got injured and someone's got to fill in for him. I got to say Newton.
Wow.
Because I think that Newton walked into an unwinnable situation in New England. I think that situation is they were so deprived of talent. They had, 8 guys opt out of the year? They had all those injuries to the wide receivers. I think that Newton, he still can be a game manager type quarterback who can win you games because we saw him do it in New England a couple times. So I think the situation is right, all things being equal, regardless of everything. I think that Cam has done something that Jimmy G and Sam Darnold hasn't, which is he's shown you multiple times he can win games by himself.
Wow. I'm actually a little stunned. Now, you might be stunned with mine. We're going out on limbs here.
All right.
Because I'm going Goff.
Okay.
Jared Goff's record, and the first year, look, the team was what it was, and Jeff Fisher was still in town. Things got a little ugly there for Jared Goff.
Well, Jeff Fisher murders every quarterback.
Yeah, 0-7 that year. But after that, 11-4, 13-3, 9-7, 9-6, and this year there was an injury in play, and if that impacted what the decisions were later on in the season, then I think it was, but there's something there where with Wentz, it's either he's going to, there's so much to bet on Wentz where you really have to pray that he becomes a version of himself that we saw for one season. With Jimmy G, he's just kind of there. I do put him, I think what you get out of a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Jared Goff pick is safe. And it's almost like I'm going with this safe pick where you're not getting, it could either be a lead or either be a dumpster fire. You're kind of getting an average to good quarterback, and it's almost like I'm taking the safe route with my answer.
You are.
Yeah, but I'm okay with that. I think you can get to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff. I've seen it happen.
And Jimmy G.
You're right.
You also
both
got
of
there
them.
with Cam Newton, too.
You're right, but you added, I don't think Cam Newton's there anymore. That Cam Newton, I think that's far gone.
Maybe not. I feel like I saw him in 3 games of the Patriots this year that told me this guy still got it in him. But the situation in New England was just too far gone.
Well, there's no doubt that the surrounding pieces were iffy, and they started out. I remember after watching them beat Miami. I wasn't saying this, but I got a lot of friends up in Boston because of hockey and all. And here we go, Josh McDaniels. This genius is gonna be so great. And then by week 6, all the thing. I hate Josh McDaniels. I hate Cam Newton. I'm like, dude, 6 weeks ago you told me this is gonna be the best team. I'm so intrigued by this offense. He told me, and I'm like, dude, think about what you said week 1.
Yeah. I think we both agree, though, that the guy that we have the least interest in at this point is Wentz and Darnold, right?
Which is scary, that Carson Wentz. Here we are. But we can we relate this to what we said? Gil brings this up with Howie. Are we too close to the situation? And I wonder, do we feel this way about Wentz because we're too close to the situation?
Maybe. Maybe we saw these other guys a little bit more. Now, okay, maybe not we. I think you and I watch a lot more of other teams and other sports than the general fan
I
does.
agree with you, but as much as we watch the other teams, I won't lie, the amount of intensity and binoculars on Carson Wentz, it doesn't relate.
It is amplified.
Yeah,
I'll give you that.
Yeah, it doesn't relate to me watching Jimmy G. While I study him and see what he does, the binoculars are not as focused because it intensifies big time with whoever's in an Eagles uniform throwing the football.
Listen. If I had to rank these guys in terms of who I've seen the most, yes, it's Wentz. But number 2 is definitely Stafford, and number 3 is Goff for me. And the guy who I've seen the least of is Darnold. And maybe that is why I'm a little more open-minded to him, because I'll just say this real quick before we go. I was critical of him coming out of college, but part of the reason why I was critical of him wasn't because I thought he was a bad quarterback. It was because I just felt like he was not as far along as some people thought, because people forget he didn't play quarterback his whole life. He became a quarterback in high school. Whereas a lot of these guys, they play quarterback their entire life. Like, usually if you're an NFL quarterback, you've been groomed for this job from like 8 or 10 years old. And Darnold wasn't. And I feel like there's a little bit of Embiid in Darnold.
I was just going to say, Joel Embiid.
So it's like, he was late to the process. He was late to the development, but there's something in there to be had.
I do think that there's a better version of Sam Darnold in him. What you've seen under Adam Gase in these bad seasons, you put him on. If Sean McVay had Sam Darnold, would you see a different version of Sam Darnold?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So I do think that there's something more in him. I just don't know if it relates to some of the other guys that we've discussed.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. UFC Welterweight Championship belt is on the line, and the champ himself is on the line. The one and only Kamaru Usman joins us on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. Kamaru, how you doing today?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this fight. I mean, you were supposed to fight Gilbert Burns a couple times already, and now you're finally going to be able to get into that cage and fight with him. What has it been like for you preparing for this fight that was supposed to happen a couple times, and now it's finally going to happen?
It's been a long and rigorous process, but I think obviously having more time now to be able to prepare to fully be ready going into the fight, I think it's only going to be to my benefit. And initially, it's a tough one to kind of swallow, fighting someone that you've known quite a bit, you've felt, you've trained with. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, this is our job, and I have to be able to go in there, put all those feelings aside, and take care of business.
What's the biggest, you feel, advantage going into a fight, knowing someone as well as Gilbert Burns? Because I think a lot of people, they would say, I don't know if I would ever fight a teammate. I don't know if I would ever, compete with somebody who knows me as well. But you seem to not be bothered by that at all. You seem to be very focused for this fight.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he even put it out. He said it. He said that I have something, he wants it, and he's coming to take it. And that's not something that I take very lightly. There's a reason I'm the champion, and I have to go in there and show him this is the reason I'm the champion, and you're not the champion. And so it's one of those things that you come for what I have, and I have to be able to defend it. So, he's a tough guy. I know he's tough, and he's going to come with his A game. And if he really did his homework, then he's going to bring out a different savage out of me that he's never seen before.
The champ is on the line. Kamaru Usman, UFC 258 Saturday night on pay-per-view. ESPN Plus is where you can watch it. Kamaru, one of the things that's interesting about your situation is you were never handed anything. You had to work for everything you were given. You wrestled at Division II in the NCAA. You were the Ultimate Fighting Champion. You're someone who's worked hard to get where you are. Do you ever take a moment to look back and just appreciate how far you've come and what you're going to be doing in your future?
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show just kind of my my life and my journey and how I approach certain things. You can even take it a step back. I started wrestling in high school my sophomore year. There were kids that have been wrestling, some kids that have been wrestling since they were 3-4 years old. And I had to close that gap on all these guys. And a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, that's an obstacle a lot of people can't get over. But I didn't care about that. I was going to get over that. I was going to do whatever it took in order to be successful in it. And that just goes to show my resilience when it comes to this game. It's not me just playing a sport just to play a sport. I don't come here just to compete. I come here to win. And that's one thing that I've been doing very well, and I'm going to continue to do until I call it quits.
Well, winning is what you've been doing a lot for sure, because 3 of your last 4 wins have been against former UFC champions. You're building an amazing resume. Is that something you have a goal of? Is one of your goals maybe to be one of the best of the best all time? Not just at welterweight, but if you keep going the trajectory you're going, you could be one of the best of any weight class.
Yeah, I mean that's when I'm said and done, that's what that's what I want bestowed upon me. I want that to be put on me as a guy that not only do you fight everybody, but you beat everybody. And so that's not something that right now that I put on myself. I try not to put that pressure on myself. I just want to go in there, take it one fight at a time. And when I'm done, everyone's going to look back on my body of work and say, wow, he was really, truly the greatest.
UFC welterweight champion Kamaru Usman joining us on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. UFC 258 Saturday night on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Kamaru, I want to ask you a question that's been asked me a lot, and that is, I know that you're a great human being. Matt Serra has told me before, you're one of the nicest people he's ever met in his life. But for a lot of people who don't understand MMA as well as someone who may be the diehard, how do you go from explain to the audience, how you go from being this wonderful, great guy outside the cage to being this dominant monster that you are when the fight starts?
It's being able to, I think for years, especially being a wrestler, I've learned and I've honed how to craft all of that, how to just hone all of that and put it together. And that's what I do very well. And I know how to turn it on and turn it off. I can turn it on and turn it off. And as soon as I cross that threshold of walking into that cage, I turn on the Nigerian Nightmare. And when I walk out of there, I have to put back on Kamaru Usman because I have a child at home. And I can't be the Nigerian Nightmare to that sweet little girl, So it's being able to learn how to turn it on and off. And I think that's part of what makes me who I am.
You mentioned your nickname, the Nigerian Nightmare. For those who are in my age group, we know that was Christian Okoye's nickname when he played in the NFL. I know that Christian Okoye gave you his blessing for that nickname. Tell the story about that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nickname that it's every exceptional Nigerian in any field of their sports to be excellent, to basically just exemplify excellence. And Christian Okoye did it. Samuel Peters did it, WBC heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And now a numerous amount of soccer players, football players have done it. So now it's my turn to carry on the torch of that name in the combat world.
Kamaru, you're 33 years old, but you're a young 33. You're not someone who's had a ton of time in the octagon like some guys who might be your age. How long do you want to keep fighting? We just saw in the Super Bowl, Tom Brady's 43. Daniel Cormier fought to about 40-something years old. How long do you want to do this?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's on how my body is able to receive and deal with everything, because to prepare for these fights is a lot. It takes a lot out of me, especially being me in the way that I prepare. It takes a lot out of me. And so that's going to determine the longevity that I have in the sport, is how healthy I'm able to stay and how long I want to continue to do it. Because over time, there's a reason people retire. Over time, the hits and the punches, they feel okay. You can deal with them, but over time, there's just that day that you wake up and say, I don't really feel like getting hit today. And so until I think we cross that path, I think I should be all right.
He is the UFC welterweight champion of the world, defending his title at UFC 258 versus Gilbert Burns on ESPN Plus. Pay-per-view is where you can watch it. And as all guests, he appeared right here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Kamaru, it's been incredible watching your ascent, become a champion, and we look forward to seeing you defend that belt on Saturday night.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Kamaru Usman joined me yesterday. You heard the interview with him. Well, it's very interesting points from him. First of all, for those who don't know, UFC 258 is tomorrow night, and he's fighting his own former teammate. They used to train together, Brody. So if anybody knows Kamaru, it's him, Gilbert Burns. So, but Kamaru said, look, to me, he said, I don't look at it as anything else for this guy's coming for what's mine. And I love that mentality. It's like, the guy's like, look, I like the guy, but it doesn't mean I have to, let him beat me just because of it.
Yeah, no, I understand completely, but I want to tie that, and you know more about this than all I do, but, I'm learning, and I'm very open to learning it all, but I feel with McGregor this last fight, one of the and this could be different, it could be individual basis, but I feel one of the reasons why he lost is because he respected his fighter more than he ever. And I know all these fighters respect each other, but I did think that there was a sense of almost too much respect. That was one of the reasons why McGregor lost. And I just wonder, because of the respect that he has for Burns, could that be a possibility in this fight? Do you see that being a possibility?
So there's two different kinds of respect to me. There's a healthy level of respect saying, I need to know that this guy can knock me out. And then there's the respect of, I like this guy. I appreciate this guy. I'm overlooking this guy. And I think that's what Conor was. I don't think Kamaru was overlooking Gilbert Burns. I don't think he's, feeling any sympathy or empathy toward Burns. I think when he says, this guy's coming for what's mine, that's a whole new level than what McGregor. I felt McGregor, and maybe he just has to be this way. He needs to he needs to be the bad guy.
Definitely.
And I think that with Kamaru, remember I asked him in the interview, I said, people want to know, how can you be, because Kamaru is one of the nicest people in the world. I mentioned to him in the interview there, Matt Serra told me that Kamaru Usman is one of the nicest people he's ever met in his life. And Matt Serra doesn't throw out compliments randomly. If he says it, it's legitimate. So I asked him, how do you go from this super nice human being to this monster in the cage? And he said, for me, he says, I have a daughter at home. And he said, when I'm at home, I'm Kamaru Usman. But when I walk into the cage, I'm the Nigerian nightmare. So he says he turns a switch, literally. And I think for McGregor, he never turned the switch. Whereas Kamaru is saying, I have a switch. And the moment I walk into the octagon, I hit that switch.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Now, because they know each other's backgrounds, if you will, do you think that maybe Usman will throw something new, different, or do you think he will stick to his, hey, this is me, you're going to have to beat me. I'm so damn good at what I do. I can play this way, or fight this way, I should say, and you're not going to be able to beat me because I'm so damn good at this? Or do you think maybe he throws him in for a loop to try something different to throw him off? Similar to what we saw with McGregor, those leg kicks, that kind of threw, or it was the takedown early. Poirier threw the takedown early, and that really threw Conor McGregor out for a loop, and then from there, things changed.
I would say both, and here's why. Kamaru's striking style is very specific, which is he has these patterns, not that they're predictable patterns, but he has a style of striking where he switches from orthodox to southpaw. He goes back and forth seamlessly as part of his striking combinations. I don't think you change who you are just because you're fighting somebody. So in that sense, I don't think he's going to change that. I think what he's going to want to do, though, is fight his style of fighting, but also understanding that this guy might be expecting certain things because I trained with him. So maybe Usman turns around to Burns and says, maybe there are certain things I won't do versus new stuff I'm going to add in because I know you've never seen it before. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that's a healthy way to do it. You don't want to compromise who you are that made you the champion. The dude has one loss his entire his entire MMA career. Okay? He's beaten all these former champions on his way to being where he is right now. Literally, if Usman keeps the belt for a couple of years, he's going to be in the conversation as one of the greatest welterweights ever in MMA history. You don't compromise who you are if you're going to go on that track. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. What do you think is a chance that Burns can get this win? What's the percentage of a chance that you give him to actually maybe beat Usman?
40.
That's a good amount.
I mean,
I haven't seen Burns fight enough. I'm still learning. The thing is, because they fight
here's the
in
problem.
so many
You
lengths
haven't
of
seen
times.
Burns fight since the Woodley fight last May.
That's my point.
He
is
hasn't
they
fought.
They fight so far away from one another.
But
So
they weren't
someone
supposed to. And that was the only part. So Burns got COVID
yeah.
over the summer, and then Usman got injured in training over in December. So these two are supposed to already fight. Burns has just been sitting around waiting for his title shot, while Usman, remember, he fought Masvidal over the summer. So he kept busy.
But Masvidal
Burns
had
hasn't.
what? He had a very short amount of time to accept that
Yeah,
fight.
but Masvidal, he's a guy, he trains all year round. He's not a guy who just, he's not, there's two kinds of MMA fighters, for those who don't know out there. There's the MMA fighter who trains year round, and then his training camp is just up to the next level. Whereas there's the guy who kind of casually stays in shape, and then when it's training camp, then he gets really into training. Masvidal is the first guy. So the reason why Masvidal lost that fight, honestly, was because Masvidal went into the fight with a completely wrong strategy. He let the guy take the fight to him. He stopped being aggressive.
Yeah, but how much of this, because when I hear, while I understand how important making sure your body's up to speed and really kicking into gear that training camp, how much of the limited amount of time leading up to a fight and saying that you'll fight with not that much time as you're normally accustomed to, how much of the mental preparation of film comes into play where you don't have as much time to dissect the opponent? How much from that angle, not so much the physical body angle, is in play? Because I think that's from an outsider looking in, just from based off hockey. When we know we're playing a team on that following weekend, we start preparing on Monday, which gives us 6 days to prepare for that opponent. And obviously fighting's different, months in advance. Right. But I wonder how much of the mental preparation of studying their game you lose out on, and that really hurts you in the octagon.
So my answer to that is, and I'm not trying to dismiss it, it depends on the fighter. There are some fighters who believe that they don't need to watch a lot of film of their opponent, like the Diaz brothers, like Nate and Nick Diaz. You know Diaz from the McGregor fights. He's one of these guys who says, I don't need to watch a ton of tape. My fighting style is going to win the fight because as long as I perfect what I'm doing, I can beat anyone. But then on the flip side, you have someone, for example, like Michael Chandler, who had the big knockout win the last pay-per-view. He's a guy who studies tape like a psycho. He's like, he's a tape junkie.
I like that. I'll be honest with you. I think if I was a fighter, if I was someone in the octagon, I'd be a tape guy. I'd really dive into that tape. I mean, it tells you something. You catch these guys' tendencies. To think that that's not important, and I'm not trying to say that some fighters don't.
But that's weird, though, because you think about it, not weird for you, but weird in terms of those are two fighters who are incredibly accomplished. Nate Diaz, some of the biggest wins in UFC history, okay? Michael Chandler now has won fights in two different organizations as a top-tier lightweight. They both have been successful with two completely different philosophies when it comes to tape study.
Yeah, I'm all in on the tape study. I feel like I'd be, your football coaches from down south that probably eat dinner while hitting the tape button and the wife gets all mad and all he does is watch tape. That would be me if I was someone who goes into the octagon nonstop just studying.
Carson Wentz.
Yeah, except I probably, I wouldn't have the downfall, at least in my head. I wouldn't have the collapse. I'd still be at the top of my game. Of course, this is all in my head.
So yeah, tomorrow night, UFC 258, ESPN Plus pay-per-view. I'm looking forward to this fight because I said this to you earlier. If anyone's going to beat Usman, it's Burns. Burns trained with him for years. Remember, people forget that when Usman fought Maia a couple years ago, the person who prepared him was Burns because Usman had never fought a high-level jiu-jitsu guy before Maia.
Here's one thing I have to say, though. Because when Khabib was fighting, the one thing I heard was, well, if someone's going to beat him, it's Gaethje. And that was an easy victory. So is this the same thing?
No.
You don't think so?
Well, Gaethje never trained with Khabib.
That's true. That is another element.
These are two guys who literally, think about it this way. You played for, let's say you got to the NHL, and you trained and worked out and played with the same goaltender for like 4 years. He's your starting goaltender. He plays with you every year. You know him better than he knows. Like, part of your job is to make him better, right? Part of your job as a guy shooting at him is to help him improve his game. Then he leaves. You get to the Stanley Cup final.
Ooh.
And who's on the other end? He is.
And I get a breakaway in overtime?
Yes.
And I'm going bar down?
Yeah.
Ew. All right, I get it. Right, you know
That's
his
what
tendencies.
we're talking about.
Right.
This is not just a normal fight. This is someone you know intimately. Someone who iron sharpens iron. He made you better. You made him better. And then you both went your separate ways, and now you're seeing each other on the largest stage with the trophy on the line.
Yeah, no, it does. It adds another layer. All I'm saying is I heard that Gaethje, if there was one guy that was going to do it, it was him. And I guess that just shows you how strong Khabib really is.
Well, I think that would show what Khabib can do.
Yeah.
That Nurmagomedov is just another level of MMA fighter. At this
In my
point.
very raw MMA career here as a UFCsman, he's my favorite to watch. I love the fact that no one can touch him. No one. There's no one even close. And he just beats you in this way of domination.
Well, Dana's trying to talk him back into fighting at
Oh,
least
I know.
one more time. And the latest rumor out there is that there is a specific fighter who's training specifically to fight Nurmagomedov.
And who's that?
George St. Pierre.
Oh.
That's the guy that Khabib says
He would do it for?
he would do it for, in theory. And apparently George St. Pierre is already training to fight him.
Is that fair, though, for the guys up top right now that are kind of waiting to see what happens?
No, it's not fair. He needs to relinquish the belt. He needs to let go of that belt. And he even admitted that Dustin Poirier should be fighting for the belt next, just not against him.
But that's
then-
ridiculous to
But
me.
then relinquish the belts. Like John Jones. Remember what he did? He said, look, I'm not retiring, but I'm going to move up to heavyweight. So I'm going to relinquish the title, and I'm going to spend a year preparing to move up to heavyweight. Why doesn't Khabib do that? Why can't Khabib say, look, I'm not defending the belt right now. The UFC let other guys fight for the title. Why should the UFC have to strip him of it? Why can't Khabib just be a generous champion?
Does this add more to, because this is all business, right? Is this planned, strategically planned, where to add another storyline to whatever is next?
No.
People will date back to this?
The only reason I say no is because this actually angers Dana. Part of the reason why he had this meeting with him in Abu Dhabi recently, it was last month they were in Abu Dhabi, was because Dana was like, look, man, you're still under contract. You still have the belt. I need to know what you're doing. I need, and Khabib told Dana, I want to see what happens at UFC 257. I want to see if any of these guys impress me. And then he came out and said, none of them impressed me. I have no interest in fighting any of these guys. And now Dana's like, looking around like, well, what do I do now? You told me that you were going to fight one of these guys. And all of a sudden, they're like, I don't want to fight.
I don't think any of them would even have a chance, though.
But that's not the point. The
I
point
know
is,
it's
as
not
a
the point.
promoter, Dana's trying to put out the best product possible. And one hand, a fighter's saying, I want to fight. On the other hand, it's like, I don't want to fight anymore. And Dana's probably sitting around somewhere. Like, every time he sees a picture of Khabib, he's like, punching the wall, yelling at it, throwing an F-bomb at it.
It could work out, and it could be a blessing in disguise, though, because if this storyline continues and he eventually does get back into the octagon, who he is speaks for himself, and people will be watching anyway. But I do feel like this could really play into just more anticipation,
Listen,
though.
he just needs to vacate the belt and go fight GSP, make his $10 million, and go home.
I'm down for that.
Well, everybody is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you 100% know who GSP is either.
Who fights for the belt then? Poirier and Chandler?
I mean, that's what I would do, but Dana's now saying that McGregor and Poirier is going to be a trilogy fight this summer, and that if Poirier wins that fight, then he'll fight for the belt.
There's no way that Conor McGregor, what is he, 3-3 in his last 6?
I have to double check. It
Okay.
might be less than that.
Okay, but regardless, it hasn't been the Conor McGregor that we are accustomed to seeing. So with that being said, does this guy deserve a shot at the belt? There's no way. His name will.
No, I'm not saying McGregor's fighting for the belt, but I'm saying the idea is that after they finish the trilogy, that if Poirier keeps winning, he would fight for the belt. If McGregor wins, then we'll have to
But isn't
throw
it
everything
somewhat
to
of
chaos.
not a lose-lose situation for Poirier, but he doesn't have as much to gain.
You are right. He is 3-3 in his last
That's
six.
because I'm a UFCsman.
Here's the problem. I forgot about the gap in time because I'm looking at the resume. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He didn't fight for 2 years at a time. So it throws you off. So really, he's 3-3 in his last 6 fights over the last 6 years. He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Sports Bash being brought to you by East Coast Roofing, Siding, and Windows, serving all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up. Visit them online at eastcoastroofing.com. We'll wrap up the show next.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
5 o'clock hour, the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN is being brought to you by Bernie Robbins Jewelers. Shop the Valentine's Day sale now at BernieRobbins.com. We are live here in the Matt Black Kia studios on 97.3 ESPN. That's Matt Black Kia. They want to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at MattBlackKia.com. I'm seeing we have a little Flyers news popping off here at late in the 5 o'clock hour.
Yeah, Kevin Durso just texted me and said this is not good news. 2 more added to the COVID list for the Flyers, Scott Lawton and Oscar Lindblom. And then he said that he thinks they might be replaced in Lake Tahoe because there's like this outdoor game that they're supposed to play in the next coming days. And he's a little scared about maybe what's coming up here because we talked about how they had such a big break from their last game to this upcoming Thursday, which is their next game. But something tells me that maybe there's more positives.
So, from what I understand the protocols, and me and Durso have talked on and off the record about this, so I don't want to, put words in his mouth. So I'm telling you my interpretation of things from what I've read. The NHL protocol is very, very strict when it comes to the contact tracing. So you can have one person test positive, but you put 10 people on the list because all of those people are considered contacts. So there's a possibility that in all of this, there might have been only 2 guys tested positive, but because of the contact tracing, you need 5 days of consecutive negative tests for you to get back on the ice. Now, in theory, 6 days from now is next Wednesday, Thursday?
Give or take.
So that would be in time for the next game. It's just you're cutting it close.
Real close, yeah. And the more and more you see on the contact tracing, you would have to imagine, they're all kind of in this COVID-19 protocol, but the more people put on there, you would imagine that means the more positive tests involved, right?
I'm assuming there's a minimum of 2.
Yeah, that's probably how I see it right now.
I don't think there's a ton of positives of all the contact tracing. Like, we see guys put on the contact tracing list who they were barely in contact with somebody. Like the whole situation in Vegas that got nuts. Like, they literally were just like, everyone's on the list. And
Devils as well. They had a lot of guys on the list.
Right. They had like 1 guy test positive. Vegas, they had 2 people test positive.
Yeah, but wasn't the Vegas one, like someone was on the, it was during the game. It was during the game.
It was a coach who was the first positive test.
Yeah, but I think it kind of was like similar to what happened with Seth Curry, where it was during the game, or Kevin Durant as well. Like during the game, they had to pull these guys off the ice. It's just crazy. But I think they'll get through it. It's similar to all the other leagues that went through it at some point. Once they get it under control, intensify things, and do more testing and whatnot, you'll be good to go.
So hopefully the Flyers can figure this out. I know Kevin Durso will have more updates over at 97.3 ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. But as of right now, the Flyers are scheduled not to resume again until the 18th, which is why I want to ask you this question real quick. As a guy who played hockey, how many days can you not skate before you get back on the ice and you feel like you're back?
Yeah, you'll definitely be rusty. There's no doubt about it. But to answer your question, would the Flyers feel off? No, there's no doubt about it. The Flyers would. But I don't know. I mean, it's such a hard question because
I mean, I saw Vegas last night, and for an entire period, they looked like they were skating in mud.
Yeah, for sure. But you got to think there's so many games where in the regular season where if you don't play in 3 days, that's kind of normal in an 82-game normal season. So,
but you're not skating either.
Right, you're not even on the ice at all. Probably like 3 or 4 days until it's like, okay, you're going to be slow and looking like you're in cement. The problem is the Flyers look that way even when they are on the ice every day.
Sports watching, viewing for Sports Talk with Bros this weekend is what? Sixers tomorrow. What else?
I think that's the only game on. But we got to talk Carson Wentz and whatnot. All the good stuff.
UFC 258 tomorrow night.
Of course.
You watching college basketball?
Yeah, I'm casually watching. I'm not diehard watching.
Jeff Nady tomorrow morning. Best of the Sports Bash. I'm filling in for Gil with my own cup of coffee.
Ooh.
I take it black with sugar.
Ooh.
You like that?
I like the black coffee. Maybe not the sugar.
He's Brody. I'm Josh Hennig. Have a great night.